Test, test, test. Test 1, 2, 3.
Okay, so we're on the record for the commission's update on PC56, which is the proceeding we had on federal funding and the utilities attempt to do that. I know that a number of parties are going to be making presentations today, and given the fact that we are starting relatively late because of how long the admin meeting went, let me offer a little bit of advice. So we get the reports that the utilities file as to what they have done and are in the process of doing. So when you make your presentations today, don't necessarily feel like you need to tell us what you've applied for and received under the federal funding acts, because we have that information. So what I'm really looking for is what can be done to encourage more activity on the part of the utilities in seeking federal funds. And if there's things that we can do to help provide incentives for you to do that, or plans that you plan on undertaking to do that. And let me be quite blunt, my view on this is very, very parochial. My attitude is the more the federal money that gets spent in the state of Maryland, the better. And quite frankly, there's lots of pots of money that different entities can apply for, even some money that we can apply for. But the large amount of money that's available under the federal funding proposals or laws can be best accessed by the utilities that we oversee. So the purpose of today's proceeding is to try to figure out a way to encourage more of that money coming to you and to us. And so with that, I guess we're starting with the utilities themselves. So I guess we'll start with Baltimore Gas and Electric, if you want to come forward and.
You sound like somebody from Baltimore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Baltimore. I know. Gotta leave the T off.
We're gonna have some technical
Oh, okay. All right. So,
wrangling here. I'm just
Sure.
putting the USB in. I can't open, so just here we go.
oh, okay. All right. Well, whenever you're ready, we're all set.
External drive is going into our system. Good thing the cybersecurity people aren't here.
Yeah, no.
Well, looks like it's.
Or was it on? Was I on the record? Oh.
I can hold it open. Just
So is this going to be BG&E Excellent or BG&E PHI? Yeah, okay. All right. That works. There.
yeah,
That's
it's
fine.
fine.
Sure.
It's on.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, let's put it on presentation mode. Alrighty.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. After being with you all day, Taylor Beckham here on behalf of the Joint Exelon Utilities, and up here we've got a full complement of the team. Sitting next to me is Crystal Barnett, who's also an Assistant General Counsel for BG&E. We've got Lucia Cook, our Director of Strategy for Pepco Holdings. We've got Amy Chandler, who's our Manager of Strategic Programs from BG&E, and then John Frayne, our Director of Regulatory Strategy from BG&E. So with that, we'll jump right into it.
All right. Good afternoon, all. Luce Cook, Director of Strategy for Pepco Holdings. Mr. Chair, I appreciate your comments up front because that's really what we intend to discuss today. So leading into our presentation, I think the highlight is the Joint Exelon utilities have done a lot to evaluate all of the IIJA and IRA funding opportunities that have been released. And really through that process have determined that from an eligibility and relevance perspective, there are very few opportunities amongst the many that are out there that are directly eligible to utilities. So I think a good starting point in this discussion is really foundationally talking about the flow of funding, specifically for IIJA and then all of those kind of relevant programs to IRA. As we look at IIJA, which is a once-in-a-lifetime funding opportunity presented by the federal government, $1.2 trillion, it's important to note how those dollars are actually being allocated and kind of pushed through for the relevant grants that have been put out. When we look at the overall package, $550 billion of it are actually for new infrastructure. The other $450 billion have really been tagged for the existing base spending that the federal government does. So we're really looking at only about $550 billion that are assigned to those eligible grant opportunities that are being pushed through. What we've seen is that those $550 billion have now been sent through all of the different federal agencies to develop programs, grant programs specifically, that can be pushed out so that those dollars can be leveraged. 2/3 of that funding, or about $385 billion, is really being pointed directly at states and local governments and tribes. That is primarily through competitive grant programs, but also through formula programs where the states can apply directly for that funding. There is an opportunity for utilities to receive downstream funding via other potential grant opportunities created at the state or local level, but more often than not, those funding opportunities have not been coming forward. The other third of that funding, which is about $165 billion, are direct programs created by the agencies in a competitive grant format that utilities can apply to, some directly, some in the format of what we're calling indirect, which means we need to leverage partners in order to apply for those dollars, meaning utilities are not prime applicants under the eligibility criteria for those applications. Part of what we're really focused on, I think, in this conversation today is recognizing that states, local agencies, and tribes are really getting the lion's share of these dollars. How do we as a utility be more thoughtful and collaborative in developing the partnerships that we need to go after that funding and maximize the dollars coming into the state of Maryland? The joint utilities have actively partnered with a lot of public entities as well as some private, and my colleague Amy will speak to some of that further, but really I think that is where the area of opportunity lies to expand on maximizing funding that is coming in through the utilities through partnerships with the state, local, and tribal kind of eligible entities that we've seen coming forward. As we transition to IRA, I think this is an important conversation to have with regards to just the overall structure of IRA. The funding opportunities under IRA primarily include tax credits, rebates, and loan opportunities that are really designed to flow directly to end-use customers. So a lot of these programs that we have seen, there's total of 125. From our evaluation, really only 5 are relevant and eligible for utilities. And of those relevant and eligible programs that we have evaluated, there are really only 2 or 3 that we think are applicable to the work that we need to do as a utility. And we have evaluated those and landed on whether or not we think it is worth our kind of, I don't want to say time, but really if it's worth the effort to go after those dollars, recognizing the back-end compliance requirements and other costs associated with those funding mechanisms. What we've really tried to do, along with our parent company, is be thoughtful about how we can leverage not only IRA dollars internally to the utility, but how we can also position them in a very thoughtful way for our end-use customers to take advantage of them. But we also recognize that there isn't a significant opportunity under IRA, just given the way that the programs are designed for the utilities to directly take a place and benefiting from the dollars. I did want to highlight the loans program that is a part of the IRA, which is probably the most relevant program of all of the programs that we've seen. In evaluating the loan program, we really have looked at the total cost of debt for those loan programs. And as I mentioned, when thinking about the ongoing compliance requirements and the financial resources required to support that, sometimes that is not the least cost kind of approach that we can take compared to traditional funding sources. So we have evaluated most of those and will continue to evaluate them for relevance and eligibility as more programs become available. But it is something that we've paid a lot of attention to and just wanted to highlight kind of again the limitations that there are that exist relevant to what is available for utilities directly. I think this next slide is a good side-by-side summary of both IIJA and IRA, and really highlighting not only the total funding amount, the relevant funding mechanisms, whether those be grants, loans, tax rebates, subsidies, or other, and really the focus sectors, because again, as I'm indicating, a lot of this is being pointed in different directions and not necessarily directly to the utility. So a lot of focus on transportation, climate, a lot of focus on healthcare, and again, transportation under the IRA. And looking at the beneficiaries, I think this list really kind of sums up what we have seen based on our evaluation and the support that we've received from some external consultants with regard to where the funding dollars are really pointed to. I think what I want to really kind of hone in on is that we do have a robust program for evaluating all of these programs, and hopefully that's demonstrated in some of this conversation. I think it's important to also note that the Exelon joint utilities have applied for about $912 million in grant funding thus far, and so we really have taken a good effort at trying to identify those programs that are eligible and relevant and going after those dollars to bring them into the state of Maryland. In addition to that, as mentioned by Mr. Chair, we have provided the monthly reporting as required by the Commission that is indicating the activity that we have gone after for our relevant grants. And so I think with that, we're really looking to try to drive a conversation that is around how we can partner better with state and local agencies to go after more dollars. I will pause there to see if there are any questions before handing it over to my colleague, Amy.
Well, actually, let me, so you mentioned the loan office, and there's a lot of people who work in the loan office who actually live in the state of Maryland, and we've had a number of conversations with them. And I guess their attitude is a little different. I mean, they seem to think that, look, we have a fairly large amount of money. It funds a lot of projects that utilities do, related to the infrastructure of your company. And to them, it seems to be sort of a no-brainer that you should be coming to them and pitching ideas and projects. And the message they gave to me was, look, we're ready, willing, and able to pass that money out. But so you made a comment about the particulars of that program doesn't make it the, I guess, least cost option for you. I guess I'd like to hear a little more about that. So.
Yes, so I'll let you know we have also been in touch with the LPO quite a bit. We've positioned at this point 6 projects in front of that office for evaluation, and this is across the Exelon utilities to determine applicability. What we ultimately arrive to is that when we're looking at the total cost of the actual loan program, inclusive of the back-end compliance requirements that require financial resources on our end, it is not the least cost approach that we can take in many instances, and that is where our Treasury has arrived in that conversation.
So when you're talking about the compliance, you're talking about the specific reporting requirements that come with a federal grant.
That is correct.
I will also say, Chair Hoover.
Well, actually, why don't you
sure.
identify yourself for the record?
Sure, John Frayne from BGE.
Sure.
So I will add to what my colleague was explaining that we are continuing to have conversations with the DOE Loan Program Office My understanding is they do have a significant amount of funding, and they are looking for projects that are very large scale, are clean energy focused. And if you look at the funds that have been dispersed, they're not to utility companies, because there are specific programs that they have around electric vehicles and clean energy that we just would not be eligible for necessarily. That said, we still have conversations with them, as Luce was explaining, that we do have ideas sometimes that we run past them to see if it would be even eligible. They're looking for large-scale projects, as I was saying. So I'm talking, more than $100 million. So, for example, the recent legislation that was passed for a network geothermal pilot, it could be something that might fit within that, framework of what they're looking for. But those pilots that we might do are likely to be smaller than the large scale that they're really looking for. That said, we'll still have conversations with them about what might be possible and what they would be open to, and we'll certainly seek to find if there is an opportunity where we could avail ourselves and benefit customers from the DOE Loan Program Office funding.
Okay, so any questions from the Commissioner?
Yeah, just picking up on that. I mean, one area that the state is very interested in, and an area that I think could really be helpful to some of our transmission issues around deactivations and load growth, is looking at the battery energy systems. And I just saw in the clips yesterday about a very large project that DTE did, 400, I think it was a 220 megawatt BESS system, about a $400 million, so large scale, and DOE through the IRA is offering $140 million. How can we get some of that here in Maryland? And we could really use some of these large battery energy systems, and we need them now. I mean, they could potentially provide some alternatives to what the PGM is requiring for the RMR and for some of the other projects. Is BGE, are your Exelon all working together to try to come up with Maryland solutions?
Absolutely, we are. I will say that, we can bring federal funding through opportunities like that into Maryland, but it also is going to require, in an instance like that we actually provide matching funding, right? So it's not, there's nothing really free in life, and so there is a cost that comes with that, and that would be incremental to whatever other, infrastructure work and things that we're also doing here in Maryland. So we're absolutely looking at that. That's absolutely the type of thing that we would consider. But I just want to also note that it's not necessarily completely free in the instance where it's a grant where there'd be a requirement for matching funds.
Definitely, it's not free, but it could be less costly than what PGM is proposing right now. I mean, how does BGE work with Exelon to look at the big picture and come up with these holistic solutions? And again, Michigan is getting $140 million of IRA money.
Yeah, and in the instance of kind of PJM, we're also always engaging with PJM, very, very active in the PJM stakeholder discussions and advocating for things like that. I know that PJM looked at battery as a potential solution for the recent closure or upcoming closure of Brandon Shores, and said that was not actually a solution that was viable. That said,
that's something that we have entities. In fact, Sierra Club is here right now that says it is, and they haven't got all the information. So again, we're not going to solve this right now, but as we're trying to advocate as a state in OPSI for holistic solutions, it would be great if Exelon, as a Maryland serving company, could support us and again try to get some of these IRA funds, just like what Michigan has gotten.
And I think that's exactly what we're saying here, is we are looking to partner with the state and with state agencies to find ways and opportunities where we could avail ourselves of funding opportunities like that.
Okay, keep working at it, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Fleischman.
Okay, so I'm assuming in terms of the cost share, it's generally 50%. So you're going to have to come up with, and then you have all of your reporting requirements on
That's right.
top of everything else. as the chair said, sort of, so much of this is a look forward, and how can we help you to make the projects be economic, so that they're economic also for ratepayers, so we can try to keep the costs down. So that's
Yeah.
I guess my sort of first question is in terms of answering a funding opportunity announcement that comes out, what is it that you feel like you are missing that could be helped from a regulatory perspective? And I guess my other question is, the infrastructure money, and that is a sort of a one-time thing, but DOE every year is given a huge amount of money from Congress. I mean, they really are sort of the half of what they do is take care of the bombs, but the other half of what they do is they give out money, and they give out a lot of it. And so have you looked to other kinds of FOAs that come out? Because it's not going to just be this. There's going to be a lot of funding opportunity announcements coming out on battery storage, on transmission. So have you been looking at that as well?
Sure. That is something that Exelon is always looking for, and in conversations with DOE or other agencies about those opportunities, for sure. I would say in answer to your initial question about what you might be able to do to help us with that, I'll say generally that it would help to have funding, quite honestly. And so multi-year plans, for example, are helpful in the sense that we are able to come in, and if we had an opportunity like a very large-scale battery storage opportunity like that, it could be discussed, and we could have clarity and be able to give clarity in an application about what we are able to do.
But separate and apart from the multi-year plan, which we don't have to take up now, have you thought about maybe coming to us initially as you are preparing for responding to an FOA, thinking, well, this sounds like something that we'd really like to do. Let's see if we can run it by the commission to see. I mean, and it doesn't have to be us. It could be staff
Sure.
as well. Does this make sense? Is this something that you think the commission is going to be supportive of, as opposed to going out, responding to the grant proposal, getting the money, and then coming to us and asking, can you approve the 50% cost share?
Yes, and I think there are instances where we have actually done that in the past, right? So if you think back a number of years ago to the Smart Grid Investment Grant, that's exactly what BGE did, right? And PHI. We came to the commission and asked you if that was something that we could do, and there was a very lengthy proceeding and process around that, which we know that is something that needs to be done, but that type of regulatory approval and process does put some limitations on the flexibility and the speed at which we could go after funding that might become available.
Okay, thank you.
So, two questions. I mean, you had come to us with that grant proposal that you had relative to the smart charging that you have with DOE, with the EV thing.
Yes.
Because that was a separate one-off.
That was a separate one-off.
That wasn't part of these funding things, because that
That's right.
predates those things. And that was something that you, I guess, got together with DOE and put
Exactly.
that together to come to us. So I guess we're sort of along the lines of what Commissioner Sushman was talking about. I mean, we're interested in you replicating that, because that one, and it seems to me, I mean, there was some questions about it, but ultimately everybody signed off on it, and we've been pretty supportive of all the things you've done with that, because we thought it was a pretty worthwhile project. So.
That's right, and with a project like that, the scale of it, that is something that I would say worked well, and we could do. And we are in conversation with, again, DOE or other agencies about opportunities like that, and that's a great example of where we are taking action as soon as we find something and are trying to put that forth. And that's another instance where I will say the electric vehicle regulatory asset really helps us with that, because there's no concern on our part as long as you approve about sort of cost recovery, right? We can, go after that funding. We know that the regulatory asset will capture, any incremental costs that we have associated with it, and there's been that conversation up front about whether it is something that we should be doing.
And so for the Exelon companies, I mean, do they on their own do investigations of various projects, or is there an Exelon overlord that figures this out? So.
I don't know if I would call them an overlord necessarily, but there are teams at Exelon in our business services company who do have roles where they're working with the federal agencies trying to find opportunities for us. There's also team members that we have here at each individual utility who are also working and running with them, and they partner and work together hand in hand on that.
Okay. All right. Okay. So do you want to move on to another person, or?
Sure. So really, as my colleague Mr. Cook had kind of gone over, we've, as the Exelon Joint Utilities, put significant effort into understanding the federal grant landscape and identifying applicable opportunities. As this next slide demonstrates, we have a demonstrated and established track record of going after these funds and taking a proactive approach in our applications. I mean, I think it's worth mentioning again, $912 million that we have participated in or put forth applications for application submissions. And those are across many categories: grid resiliency, storage, transportation, a variety of different goals there. And I think that underscores our commitment to securing these funds to benefit our customers, our communities, and also align with our energy goals. In just this past month in May, we submitted 5 GRIP grant applications alone. And then again, we were just discussing a little bit about our internal processes, and an additional demonstration of our proactive intentions and efforts in going after these funds is that we have an effective and a robust internal process for identifying opportunities and strategically trying to curate these grant application projects to have the maximum impact and hopefully secure the most federal funds to bring them to the state of Maryland to help ratepayers. At the top is our Exelon Grant Management Office. As we were just indicating, they're really there as a resource for us. They help identify opportunities, they help educate the utility level teams as what is out there, and they're really there to help facilitate these funds and these projects. From there, each utility has a grant lead. There are strategic leadership teams and support teams that are all working together at the utility level autonomously to identify operational priorities, grant opportunities, and also try to align that to customer and community benefits and state goals. And then in addition to that, we've even found thoughtful external partnerships with consultants that are veterans in the federal grant space to help us give an additional competitive advantage to secure even more funds and make our applications that much more worthwhile in that space. Additionally, as Luce had indicated earlier, we are really looking to focus on partnerships. In addition to playing the role of primary applicant, we've partnered on a number of our grant opportunities to help amplify our efforts to bring the funds in the door. And I think that really demonstrates a willingness to work with other stakeholders to bring the funds to the state of Maryland. And also, in addition, we've performed outreach. We've worked with grant recipients to service their interconnection requests when other funds have come in to other members and stakeholders in our community. And we've supported many, many grant applications simply to be a good partner and a steward of the clean energy transition, and help try to facilitate more federal funds in the communities we serve. This slide speaks to the competitiveness of these grant programs. This is a peek at the 2023 GRIP grant program in Topic Area 1 and Topic Area 2. And really this slide really highlights how competitive they are. 5.5% of the initial concept papers submitted received awards in Topic Area 1, and in Topic Area 2 that was 10%. For this 2024 round that we just submitted applications in May, the DOE gave us advice that based on concept papers submitted, it would be even more competitive this funding cycle. So based on that, our applications, and they will be distributed geographically as well. There is intention given to, they want to make sure that, the country is served with these federal funds. So that just highlights a little bit about the competitive nature of the grant opportunities that are available to us.
And then I don't know that I need to necessarily spend a whole lot of time on conclusion here. I know that that our time is limited, but I would highlight. I know that the commission had issued a supplemental notice for comments on House Bill 1393, and I would just note that we would like to see regulations that at least recognize the fact that some of the funding opportunities are not, the utilities are not eligible for them, right? So we believe that the regulation should recognize that fact to make sure that we actually have the ability to comply with them, and they result in, the incentive and the, direction that the utilities would be going after federal funding and focusing our efforts on federal funding, that we really do have the best opportunity to succeed in obtaining.
So back to the partners that you say you're seeking out. I mean, I don't need specific names, but can you give me examples of the types of partners that you're looking for? Or?
Sure. I think partnerships is a broad term, right? So we can talk about a few different applications. For instance, this recent GRIP grant round, we partnered to be a subrecipient on 3 additional federal applications for the IIJ's GRIP grant cycle. Recently we've partnered with the Maryland Port Administration to help support their $100 million grant application through the Clean Ports program. So that's a level of partnership where we may not be directly receiving federal funds, but we're helping them, work those funds into the state of Maryland. There's a variety of partnerships, and also if we want to talk on the community level, these federal grant funds have a community benefits portion to help direct the equitable distribution of funds in our communities, and that is built in, and even the DOE said this application cycle, that is what will be a primary tool that they're looking to examine. So the nature of these grant applications ask us to partner with a variety of different community partners, and I know on this most recent round of GRIP grants, I believe our one application had about 7 different stakeholders that we partnered with in the one application, just as an example.
And I'd add to that, DOE has actually prioritized coalition approaches for these programs and opportunities that are available. Another example that I think is relevant, at least for the PHI utilities, is actually in Ace, New Jersey. We partnered with our BPU on an application for GRIP Topic Area 3. So I think there are a lot of opportunities, again, to bolster different types of partnerships, and that application is specifically around grid enhancing technologies and the completion of a study to advance grid enhancing technologies, specifically in our Ace, New Jersey territory. So another example of a partnership that I think could be adapted.
And have you had any difficulty in finding partners, or is it, generally if you go to somebody and say, hey, we need you to team up with us on this, or they're cooperative?
Generally, I think that, I think we're lucky in that we explained before that we have taken a really proactive approach to understanding the grant landscape, and we're being used as a resource within our communities and our service territories for these grant and funding applications. So it has been, when we're reaching out for partnerships, it hasn't been difficult to find them. It's just these GRIP grant applications specifically, if we were going to refer to those, are, time consuming to put together. So, making sure that in the amount of time that we have to turn around these applications, that we can source these partnerships, I would say, is the biggest challenge. However, we have found a variety of partners in a multitude of applications to be supportive with.
Mr. Sushman.
So the applications that involve partners, you're not the prime in any of those?
That is correct.
Okay. So the prime is responsible for the reporting requirements, and then you just sort of feed your information to them, and they'll provide that to DOE. And they have the 50% cost share does that cost share flow down to you as well?
In many instances, it does, so we are a contributor to the cost share.
Okay, but but there are instances where the cost share is different for you?
That is
And-
correct. There are some instances where we are not providing the cost share. When I mentioned the application for New Jersey BPU, they are covering the cost share, and they are just providing that funding to us to execute the study.
Okay, so what's your contribution then?
It is the actual implementation side of it, but there is no financial contribution to that structured partnership.
Okay, and then, so then you won't be coming to us for cost recovery because
Well,
you're
that's
not
also in
expending.
New Jersey. That's for a New Jersey example that I gave.
Right, no,
in those
but you are engaged with that, you're a partner in that.
Correct, but
Right.
that's for our ACE utility. I was just using.
Oh,
that as an example of a
okay,
partnership.
right, I'm thinking, right, okay. So Atlantic City is there, putting in their cost share, and is that also, they're not putting any,
There's no
okay,
cost share. The
Okay.
BPU is covering the cost share
okay.
component.
And so they won't be seeking cost recovery because they're not, and, they're not gonna, but they're not, they're putting it in kind, or, I mean, what's their so,
The structure of the partnership is such that the BPU is essentially funding the entire project. We are an implementation partner.
okay.
Just to be clear, the BPU means the Board of Public Utilities.
Right, no. Okay, so, but there is a cost in terms of implementation. I mean,
Correct.
right.
They are covering that.
They're
cost.
covering that cost
We
too.
are actually a subrecipient on the grant.
Okay,
But
okay.
we are not putting forth any in-kind or cost-share contribution.
Okay, but in other situations, so you're not, you're not wedded to the cost share, but it depends on the arrangement that you have with your partners.
That's correct.
Okay.
And again, each grant is structured differently. Not all grants have a 50/50 cost share, so it really is kind of on a case-by-case
Okay.
basis how that's structured.
Can we go back to the slide? Keep going, stop. Okay, so, in terms of topic area A, topic area 1, topic area 2, did any of the Exelon utilities submit applications in those, for both of those?
We did for
Okay.
both of those. This
Okay.
is for round 1 of GRIP. For the Exelon utilities, PHI, Pepco, and Delmarva Power submitted 5 applications.
Okay.
And were awarded none. BGE,
I believe BGE had submitted 2 concept papers and 1 application.
Okay.
I would have to go back and verify.
So the concept paper is, as I recall, the concept paper comes in and then they tell you whether you can go to the next round.
that's correct.
Okay.
And it's a recommendation. It's a letter of encouragement or a letter of discouragement.
Right.
But even those that are discouraged are not prohibited from applying.
Right, but you're better off sort of putting your resources someplace else.
Absolutely.
Okay, so, but also didn't, so went to the second round, but didn't make it through. Okay. And is there, but there's a round 2?
Correct, which is what Amy was speaking to. Those
Okay,
applications
and so you've
in May.
put in, Exelon has, the companies have put in how many applications for round 2 funding?
5 total between BGE, Pepco, and Delmarva Power.
Okay. And you're waiting now for,
Evaluation, and typically we'll see in fall the announcement of those awards.
okay. Okay, so you've gone past the concept paper phase with those 5?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And the applications have been submitted with those 5, yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
There was one thing I just wanted to
Sure.
highlight for the commissioners when we were discussing, Commissioner Suchman, your point about coming to the commission during that time period, I guess, during the funding, the announcement of the funding of opportunity, or the FOA. I have the acronym, but not the explanation of the acronym, and then the submission of the concept paper. I just want to highlight that process is a quick turnaround process. And I invite my colleagues to, correct me if I'm wrong, but it could be somewhere like, I think, in 2 months. So if I remember correctly, like from the time a FOA is announced, we've got to get a concept paper in, and then the application is due maybe 2 or 3 months after that. So it is a quick turnaround. So having that time in between.
Right, no, I've done these in my
Got it.
previous life,
Yeah.
so I'm very familiar with the merry-go-round of right. So yeah, I mean, maybe we're going to have to sort of have some more discussions about what would make the most sense. I mean, the challenge, of course, is that unless you come before us in a formal way, we can't really give you a yes or no on whether we're going to allow for cost recovery of something. So I understand unless we pre-approved it and then, but so I understand the challenges that you face in going in, and I've actually been in a situation where a client had to turn down an award. So I understand. So I understand the process, and I understand but at the same time, we can't just give blank checks. And so, yeah, I don't know if anybody has a solution, but we'll keep talking it through.
No, and I think you raise a valid point. What we saw between GRIP 1 and GRIP 2 is an actual call out from DOE that projects have to have regulatory approval.
Yeah.
I think they ran into that hurdle the first round where some projects maybe did not get that cost recovery approval, and so then that cost share component was at risk. And so I think that is also what we're trying to solve.
So
for.
are they asking in applications
It is.
for
Sorry.
approval of a particular cost share?
They have noted in the FOA that any projects that are put forward should have regulatory approval, and that is a new edit that was made as a part of the second round FOIA.
And okay.
So I think the challenge that we're also describing is that because most of these funding opportunities are prioritizing innovative work and really not looking at work as normal in the utility, it's a bit of a challenge for us to also position competitive applications without having that foresight into whether or
Well,
not.
and the problem is you're asking us for a prudency review before we're ready to do prudency review.
So acknowledging we're in the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand.
And was that a decision internally that DOE made in interpreting?
I don't know how they arrived to it, but I do know that it was a noted change that they acknowledged as a part of the second round versus the first.
Because I guess, obviously we have a big trade association in DC, and it may be possible for us to have conversations with DOE to say, look, you operate in this world, we operate in this other world. There should be some way that we can make some accommodations so that we can both do our job. If they're particularly handicapping, you because of what you got to do with us. So, because I actually had some experience in a prior job where there was a lot of back and forth between the state agencies who were the grant recipients and the department on what the rules and regulations were, and there was some negotiation that came about because of that. So,
Commissioner Suchman, I would just add that, I don't know that regulatory approval, I don't believe it actually means that you have to deem the work prudent before it's done, right? You could approve that the work is something that should be done. You could even include it in rates, like in a multi-year plan, but which we won't discuss here now.
Yeah.
But, the prudency review necessarily really needs to be done after the work is completed.
But there's not a little bit of prudency. I mean, I don't understand how we can give approval to something if we haven't done a prudency review. That's dereliction of duty. I mean,
Well-
I don't, and I guess, I wasn't, I know that this has been an issue about, the chicken and egg thing, but I wasn't aware that I'm assuming what the commission, what DOE is saying is basically we'll give priority to projects that have regulatory approval, and that puts others at a disadvantage and forces our hand. I mean, and that's the challenge too, is that, if we want you to get the money and we want you to get it badly,
Yep.
then it forces us to make prudency determinations before a project is before the shovel's gone in the ground.
Yeah, and I will use again smart grid as an example there, where the commission back in probably the 2008 to 2010
Tell you
timeframe.
exactly, that was
Yeah.
when one of my clients walked
Okay.
away.
Yeah.
Because they
Well,
didn't get approval.
Yeah, and that was definitely a very large discussion here in Maryland in front of this Public Service Commission
Right, but
as well.
but DOE
But-
gave the money before
Yes.
approval happened.
Yeah. So we actually came before the commission and got approval to move forward with the work, but the prudency review didn't happen until 2015, 2016 for BGE. Everything was put into a regulatory asset that was
Well, I
then
think-
reviewed in that rate
I
case
think
once
Mr.
the work was
Spivak
done, but-
has the solution.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know about a solution, but just a little clarification. As Mr. Frayne indicated, a prudency review is something that generally happens after the fact, and you're asking the question, would a reasonable manager, knowing what they knew at the time that this was proposed, go forward with that project? That's really what you're asking in a prudency
well,
review.
actually,
What you're
it's
doing
it's
up-
not what I'm asking, it's what DOE is expecting.
Well, no. I mean, because what you're asking up front, what you're looking at up front, are any number of other things that might go into determining whether you think, are you the reasonable you're the reasonable manager at that point, and do you think, given what you know now, that this project is worth moving forward on, and therefore can you, Commission, approve them moving forward on the project? A prudency review happens when they come in for cost recovery.
Okay, and then can we say no at that point?
You can, but you would need to have you would want to meet a fairly heavy burden of evidentiary record.
So it really, but so that in order to,
You have to second guess yourself. It's difficult.
well, but we're second guessing ourselves when we really didn't have the tools to guess in the first place. I mean, basically what we're saying is, before they even submit their application, we're going to allow you to do this project if you get the money for it. So it's, I mean, they don't even have the money yet. They don't even know that they want, and they may go ahead or may not. And once they get the money, then our hands are tied. We can't really say no.
Well, and that's true, although once they actually get the money, that does go a ways towards saying that this was a prudent exercise, a prudent project to do. If you are moving forward with a project that has a substantial amount of federal funding underlying its costs, that means ratepayers are getting this project at a discount. Now, it can still be very mismanaged along the way, and that might lead you ultimately to determine that a project was not done prudently.
I don't know if I'd want to tie our hands at such an early stage. It seems to me that there has to be a better way of approaching this, rather than making a prudency determination even before the application for the grant money goes in.
Well, like I said, I mean, I don't think you could really regard that as a prudency determination. It is more it is a judgment whether the project is worth moving forward. Prudency determination is going to be something that was do you believe, after all is said and done, that this was done?
See, I'm looking over at our new general counsel, and he's got his hands in front of his face, and so yeah.
All right, okay.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, no, I understand. So anything else from you folks, or? Okay, all right, well, thank you very much. Let me turn to Potomac Edison.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Just make sure I get everybody's. That's it.
No, like I said, maybe that's- Should you have a talk with DOE about it?
Yeah, well, that would be I don't know why you do it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Good afternoon, Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Daniel Garcia with Potomac Edison Company. And with me today, I have Mr. Gary Grant. He's the Vice President of Transformation for First Energy. Well, I'll go ahead and pass the baton on to you, Mr. Grant.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for the chance to be here today. As you might imagine, pardon me, much of what I would say would be duplicative, so I'll spare you all of that. We would all describe the programs the same way and some of the challenges the same way. I'll try to give you the perspective from our seat. We've obviously participated in several rounds of grant applications. We've developed and submitted more than a dozen concept papers across our entire service territory, with 4 of those pertaining to Maryland. We've recently enhanced our approach and made investments to grow our capabilities. We intend to continue to do that, capabilities in regards to how we pursue grants. And I'll describe a little bit of what we're doing here. Our early efforts were really managed by a small group of employees with the help of a boutique consulting firm. Their efforts were really effective. They did a very nice job in pulling the work together. They yielded 5 concept papers that were encouraged to file full applications. And in April, it was announced that one of those applications was awarded a grant in West Virginia. So they've seen some success. We're very proud of what they've been able to accomplish, and believe that it illustrates the seriousness with which we pursue and have pursued the federal dollars. We've also learned a lot along the way, much like our colleagues that spoke before me, learning about what DOE requires and how that can shift over time. And for this most recent round, we partnered with a large consulting firm who's got a great track record and tremendous insights into what DOE is looking for to help position us to help give us a better position in regards to all of the others who are also applying at the same time. We've also expanded the team of employees who's involved in the day-to-day preparation of the grants and of the papers. We want to make sure that we've got adequate coverage for all aspects of that application process. In this round, we submitted 5 concept papers, and 4 of them were encouraged by DOE, and we ultimately turned in 4 applications, 2 of those pertaining to work that would occur in Maryland. Up until this point, we've had employees that have worked on this more as an addition to their day job. So think of them as part-time, working on grant applications part-time, doing their regular day job. We've intended to continue using subject matter experts from across the companies because that's really where a lot of the subject matter expertise exists. So identifying what opportunities we want to pursue and helping prepare those applications will still rely to a great degree on those folks. But we've also made an investment. We've built out a grant management group whose responsibility it will be to identify those opportunities, determine who needs to be involved in drafting the concept papers and applications, managing the process to ensure we meet the deadlines, coordinating any partnerships that we might have, and managing any post-grant negotiations and compliance. There's a manager who's responsible for that, and there's 4 positions in that organization, 3 of which are staffed, and the 4th should be very soon. So we're making investments in those areas to make sure that we have adequate staffing, adequate focus on it, and adequate expertise. Our intention over time here is to develop more internal expertise and reduce our reliance on those external resources. We think that's both more effective and in the long run more efficient. This round of applications is expected to be a lot more competitive than the earlier rounds. I think that my colleagues did a great job in explaining that. And the actions that we've taken so far, I think, show that we understand that competitiveness and have a strong intent to make every effort to be successful in pursuing those grants. We've also shown a willingness to evolve and enhance our capabilities. We too have partnerships. We've partnered with and gained the support of several of our unions along the way, which I think DOE has outlined as one of the critical elements in making sure that we're successful. Depending upon the type of grant, we've partnered with community-based organizations, and we've also made 2 applications. We were sub-applicant in 2 situations where one of a state agency was the primary applicant for it. So we are seeking out those partnerships wherever we can. We're really willing to work with any and all interested parties to make sure that we've got the most competitive and impactful grant applications. We want to make sure that our customers are going to see real benefits as a result of them. And we're committed to hearing from all of the stakeholders and incorporating their feedback as we go along this journey. So happy to take any questions you might have.
So, so the Exelon folks described sort of the process they have of folks within the local companies that sort of do this work, and then people at Exelon to do it. Is your process the same, or?
Very similar, yeah. There's not a single point source for all ideas. You want to make sure that you're getting all voices at the table so that you're identifying any potential opportunity. You figure that some of these ideas can be very localized and address a very small local or regional issue. Others can be much larger, and there could be a different group of people responsible for it. But I gather my peers, and they get their teams engaged on these things, and we identify opportunities and try to surface ideas that we believe that the Department of Energy would have an interest in, because obviously they're looking for innovative ideas. They aren't looking to displace our normal work. So.
And the other thing they mentioned was that the compliance costs and reporting costs were, I guess, at least a hindrance to them pursuing some of this. Is that true for you, or?
It's something that you obviously have to consider, right? And I know that I've spoken to colleagues at other utilities that probably underestimated what it was going to take to comply with a federal grant. I feel like we're going into it with our eyes wide open. We have plans underway to form a partnership. In fact, we have a competitive bidding process underway right now where we're interviewing third parties that have expertise in this area who can come in and help us learn that. So we're trying to make sure that before we win anything, and assuming that we will, that we have the infrastructure and the knowledge base in place so that we'd be able to administer it correctly.
Commissioner Richard, any questions?
Kind of similar to a question I asked the Exelon group. I mean, do you have just coordination within your company, First Energy, to look at those solutions across your companies and look at things that are happening at PJM and what is necessary to, again, build out the grid? Specifically, obviously, we're interested in providing support for Maryland policies and objectives.
Yeah, very much so. We have an integrated approach so that any idea that's raised, no matter where it's sourced from, would get a level of review and there'd be line of sight by all of our operating entities back towards the pool of ideas that are there. So, for example, if someone came up with a great idea who happened to be in Ohio, the folks who work in Maryland would have direct line of sight to that and have the ability to draw parallels and understand whether or not there'd be the same or similar opportunities presented in Maryland.
Okay. Yeah. And then and you're able to, again, look at what your existing needs are, because in just discussing, funding opportunities, it would be great first to look at what are we doing already, what do we already need to do to come up with the least cost or most cost-effective solutions, and then look to some of these funding opportunities. And I'm just kind of trying to find out if companies are looking at it that way at all, and trying to again support, particularly you're part of the PJM. A lot of the OPSI states have said we'd like to see more holistic planning, and that's where it seems like if you marry that with these potential funding opportunities and large amounts of money, where we could really get the best value for these dollars, and not just like coming up with an idea and then trying to figure out if we get another cost share.
Right. I think I understand your question, and one of the challenges that you face is DOE has expressed that they're not interested in funding base work, right? Work that we would normally otherwise take on. So it isn't meant to substitute federal dollars for what would otherwise be state dollars. It's meant to fund innovation and ideas that otherwise might not get built. So finding that sweet spot between the innovation that DOE is looking for and the solutions to the problems that we'd probably already be solving is where we're trying to exist, so that we can find those real world solutions and find ways to help fund them.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's that innovation we're trying to come up with, because some of the just efforts to just rebuild the grid of the past or just continue is not what we're looking for. I think we do need to be more forward-looking, and that's kind of what I feel like we're missing that somehow in the current process.
And one of the areas that DOE is focused on here, especially recently, is on reconductoring. What use might we make of advanced conductors, conductors that are capable of carrying much more capacity in existing corridors, so you don't need bigger footprint to serve more load. And we've been working closely with all of our colleagues and DOE to understand that and to find if there's areas where we could apply that kind of technology.
Yeah, and then we hear a lot in Order 1920 about the right sizing too, because it seems like that is sort of a forward-looking approach to things that you were doing anyway.
Right.
So,
Right. Exactly.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, does the geographic location of some of the service territories of your company give you any advantage? I mean, isn't part of that law aimed at sort of disadvantaged areas, and so does that give you a leg up on some of the others? Or?
It probably, in that we have, we do serve a fair number of disadvantaged communities, absolutely, and that is a prominent part of the application, that you describe how it will help disadvantaged communities. But part of the dollars are also earmarked for smaller utilities, which we wouldn't meet that definition. So I think that DOE has, I think that what they're trying to do is make sure that they have a rational way to make sure that not all of the dollars get concentrated in any one area, but they have a fair opportunity to spread them out everywhere.
Mr. Fleshman.
So you mentioned that you have 2 applications in. So you've gone past the concept phase, and you've got to. And do you feel comfortable in describing what those applications are?
I probably shouldn't go into a lot of details. I know.
Well, that's why I'm sort of asking.
Yeah.
Whatever. I mean, can you give us a general sense of? I guess more than anything else, I'm interested in knowing if it's going to benefit PE.
Certainly, there were 5 concept papers that we submitted in this round. 4 were encouraged, 1 was discouraged. We looked at the one that was discouraged and decided that it probably wasn't worth pursuing, given the fact that it already had a kind of a strike against it.
Right.
The 4 that we ended up submitting, 2 of those 4 have elements that would help PE.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
And 2 would not, because they'd be jurisdictionally outside Maryland.
Okay, and so have you talked to DOE about reconductoring? Do you know that it's an area that they are interested in, and how do they? I mean, you sort of said you said earlier that they wanted to get you to do things that you wouldn't normally do, and I mean, the thing about reconductoring is you do it, and it's pretty economic in terms of so I guess I'm trying to understand how I mean, DOE is trying to tap into areas that need that extra bit of funding. How are they justifying sort of adding money to an area that shouldn't really need the money?
I'll do my best to answer,
Okay.
my perception of what DOE wants to do. I couldn't pretend to tell you
No, I
exactly what
know.
they want. But my perception is that from their seat, they think that reconductoring could play a larger role than it is.
Okay, so basically using funding as a way to jumpstart the industry and get them sort of focused on this. Okay. And then I'm assuming, like everything else, it would be 50% cost share on your end for
Right.
are you in the 2 so you have 2 applications or 4 applications?
4 applications, 2 that pertain to Maryland.
Okay, and then in those 4 applications, you're the prime in all 4?
We, no, in one case we aren't, but that's outside Maryland.
Okay, so the ones involving Maryland, you're the prime in both of those?
Correct.
Okay, and you don't have any partners on those, it's just,
We have, partners being a very broad
okay, so you have
term.
fellow companies under the
Right.
First Energy umbrella.
And there'd also be community partners that we've worked with to understand what stakeholder needs are.
Okay.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, so they are the subs within, but you're going to be the prime in.
We'd be the prime in all those in
Okay.
the cases
Okay.
in Maryland. Yes,
Great.
that's
Thank
correct.
you.
Yep.
Can I just ask one more?
Sure.
Are there any specific opportunities related to the DOE National Interest Electric Transmission Corridors? The fact that they've designated some of these that appear to cross western Maryland and for the Mid-Atlantic?
I don't recall any right now. I'd be happy to look into it.
Okay, I'm
though.
just curious if there might be opportunities there, since those corridors, the NITSI, is that what we're calling them? NITSI, the
NITSI,
NITSI
yeah.
corridors are, and they do appear to cross Maryland. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Smecco.
Good job, sir.
Good afternoon. Damon Krieger on behalf of Southern Maryland Electric Cooperative, and I would move that next time we go in reverse alphabetical order. So let me first start by introducing my colleague to the right, Ryan Edge. He is our Vice President for Strategy. He is the overlord at SMECO when it comes to federal grant opportunities. He's been a part of our efforts to seek federal support since the first concept paper was submitted by the cooperative several years back, and so he's very familiar with all of our efforts to secure federal funding to support our customer members. And so we obviously filed 2 sets of comments that has a lot of robust information. Certainly don't want to repeat what's been said today, but let me highlight a few points that are specific to the cooperative. First is certainly the fact that we do have a scarcity of resources as compared to the other utilities in the state, but we're very proud with what we've been able to accomplish so far with the resources in place under Mr. Edge's auspices. And what's the important takeaway from there to capture some of the comments that's come from the bench throughout this proceeding so far is that we are very much open to any stakeholder contributions when it comes to funding opportunity announcements that are out there that we may not know of. We only know what we know. And so if anybody has an idea, we would love to hear it. Fortunately for us, some of the opportunities are specific to cooperatives, and we do have a network of not only peers, but through national organizations specific to cooperatives that do also provide a funnel opportunity for opportunities in this space. But we're always looking, and with our scarcity of resources, we certainly appreciate any support whatsoever from staff or OPC or other stakeholders in the mix. And so I'll just quickly highlight the 3 areas under both of the acts, the IAJA and the IRA, that are specific to the cooperative. The first under the IAJA is where we were successful, which is in topic area 1 of having our concept paper turn into an encouragement letter, turn into an application, and ultimately a request to negotiate for an award. And that's where we are right now. And this was a project under, again, topic area 1 for the GRIP Resilience and Innovation Partnerships managed by DOE. And our application was a submission of a collective of what I would call reliability, resiliency, and DER supportive work. In total, we were, the project was valued at about $42 million. The DOE grant portion is about 2/3, about $34 million was put forward for SMECO, and we are in the final stages of negotiation. For whatever reasons, the end date keeps getting pushed a bit, but we're hopeful to close out on the award in the 3rd quarter of this year. And so that's a significant area of funding support for projects that we would be doing. It's just a matter of when. And so it really accelerates the receipt of benefits by our customer members as a result of having access to this federal funding. The second one is under the IRA, which is specific to cooperatives, and it's under the Empowering Rural America program managed by the Department of Agricultural Rural Utility Services. And this was an opportunity for funding to support projects that would meaningfully reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that was certainly the first and foremost what was at issue in those opportunities. We submitted what was called a letter of interest, and the letter of interest would have then led to the opportunity to negotiate for an award. Unfortunately, we weren't successful, but it was a great learning opportunity for the cooperative in that we built a suite of very innovative projects that featured expansion of our existing utility-owned solar facility, battery energy storage, and even some novel local DER projects. And we packaged that and submitted as part of that application. Again, unfortunately, we were unsuccessful, largely because most of the funding was directed towards opportunities to retire fossil fuel-fired generation across the cooperative landscape. And so while there was certainly a letter of an appreciation for what we did submitted, we were not selected. Interestingly, when you talk about seeking low-cost debt, that was an opportunity for us, which as a cooperative, we're highly leveraged when it comes to our requirement to depend upon the debt market. And the loan opportunity was to receive financing as low as 2% on the new project work, but also to refinance existing assets that might be retired or abandoned as a result of the work being performed. So a good, significant opportunity to tap into a preferable or a preferential lending resource as well. And then the third is under the second round of funding under GRIP, administered by the DOE. We did submit a concept paper for that. Similar, but a little bit more advanced set of projects as compared to our first round of funding. We did get a letter of encouragement for that application, and we submitted our full application in April of this year. And so in total, we think we've moved forward very successfully so far in terms of our effort to seek federal funding support. It would be great if lightning struck twice in the case of GRIP, but as was sort of indicated earlier, I think the belief is that funding is going to be spread across the country geographically and across different utilities, so it may not strike twice, but we were certainly appreciative of receiving the encouragement letter and the opportunity to move forward to the application. And so with that, Mr. Edge and myself are available for any questions that the Commission may have.
So in this issue about trying to get ideas, do you get any suggestions from your national association about what other co-ops are doing around the country? Or
We do, and actually I'll let Mr. Edge comment on that one.
Sure. They've also taken an initiative because so many of the cooperatives, 900, 950 or so in the country, so many are not even close to the size of SMECO in terms of number of members they serve. And so they don't have the resources to even attempt to the same degree that we do. Like, my position wouldn't even be, you know, that capacity wouldn't necessarily be within their hierarchy, right? Someone focused on strategy and innovation. And so they, as a service to those members at the national level, have created a consortium to where they could pool projects across lots of different cooperative territories, submit as one application to the Department of Energy. And I can't comment to their degree of success so far, but I know that's been a different approach. And we've been invited to those, and so far have taken our own path, which has so far been successful. But that is certainly one way we get ideas.
Sure.
So the award that you've been given, so your cost share is a third. Is that sort of typical for co-ops? Or is that unique to that project? Do you know?
Well, we were one of 16 in the nation that were selected for this, so I'm not sure if there is a typical outcome, at least for that particular available funding opportunity. In the conglomerate partnership type structure, I think NRECA is sort of proportioning out the funds depending upon the scale and scope of the projects of the other cooperatives that are in that consortium. But for us, among the other 15 projects that were awarded, I actually couldn't exactly tell you. I think there were different percentages, so maybe no.
So the threshold was 4 million megawatt hours of energy sales in the previous calendar year. Less than that threshold, you were qualified by the DOE as a small utility. That was their definition. And it was based on your filing of EIA Form 861, I think is what we referenced.
Okay, so you were classified as a small utility, so your cost share would have then been reduced. Okay, that's interesting. The loan, is this a loan guarantee program run under RUS?
Yeah, this, for the New Era program, it is administered under RUS, and
Okay.
it was specific to this funding announcement opportunity.
Okay.
So it's unique. Certainly RUS administers other loan programs.
Right, well,
for this.
they get money from FFB. So, and do you have RUS money?
Do not anymore. We used to be.
Okay. So this is, and do you know if this is below the FFB money? Below the FFB rate?
Yes, it's,
I
well,
would
2%
assume.
is definitely lower than the FFB.
Right,
yes.
okay. And, do you know, do you know the commitment obligations on your part? I mean, do you have to have some cost share aspect to it?
Yeah, well, so we were unsuccessful for
Right.
for this program, and it was one of the components. So you could have actually applied for a sort of a loan only award, a grant and loan, or just a grant. So
Okay.
we did the grant and loan combination, and so I can't remember the exact proportion. I don't know if you remember, but we did ask to have. We have a loan on our existing utility-owned facility, a solar facility, and so there would have been an opportunity to upgrade our panels because it's about 15 years old to more efficient panels, and then in retiring those existing assets, we could have refinanced our existing loan at a favorable rate.
Okay.
So that would have been a really good opportunity for us.
Okay, so now the programs, where are they going? The programs you developed for this proposal, are you going to go ahead and do them anyway, or?
So that's a great question. I think they are programs we would love to see pursued under a future funding opportunity.
Okay.
They are not the types of projects that we would typically do on a day-to-day basis.
Hence,
through the normal
the
course.
need for a
That-
grant?
that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Exactly.
So, do you have the same reporting and compliance issues with the grant you got that the investor owns have talked about, or is there a different set of requirements for you, if you're aware?
To my knowledge, they would be consistent.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still in the process of those negotiations, so we've not yet.
But,
Yeah.
and you don't view that as a hindrance or a problem?
There are a lot of lessons learned, to be perfectly honest, in terms of the process that we're going through right now with DOE to get to the award stage. There have been, I don't know if it's an amusing example or an example, nevertheless, there have been many, many versions of templates that we've had to fill out along the course of this engagement because they keep changing as they learn lessons and incorporate new
Sure.
opportunities. And so it is certainly a process. We haven't even seen the final award contract terms and conditions yet, and so the exact compliance requirements are not fully known to us yet. We know what was in the original announcement, and we have checked the boxes on our ability to comply with all those requirements, but there are Davis-Bacon Act requirements where
Right.
we've had to modify systems to comply, so it is certainly a challenge.
Okay. Commissioner? No questions. Oh, okay. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Actually, let me turn to the public interest non-governmental groups. Let me start with Sierra Club, if they're in the house.
Andrew's lost his. You're just like, I'm just meeting Joe. I have too many balls in the air. So I thought I'd have a little levity, and then you. Okay. Well, 'cause he said it, but he just sort of.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Sari Amiel, appearing on behalf of Maryland Sierra Club. Can you hear me okay? No, okay, good. So our goals are focused on mitigating climate emissions, which requires Maryland to electrify various sectors of its economy, particularly the transportation and building sectors. There are billions of dollars in federal funds available nationwide under these two pieces of federal legislation, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or EJA, and the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA. This is a pivotal opportunity for the Commission to ensure that Maryland utilities are planning around the many sources of federal funds available and making their customers aware of these federal funding opportunities. I won't list all the specific opportunities now, but I urge the Commission and utilities to review the comprehensive list in Sierra Club's May 1st filing. On the transportation side, Federal incentives include hundreds of millions of dollars nationally in grants for electric vehicles, including medium and heavy-duty transit and school buses, as well as electric vehicle chargers. For buildings, the IRA provides rebates and tax credits, which will be administered through MEA, for utility ratepayers to install clean heat pumps, electric water heaters, washers, dryers, other appliances, and upgrade their home's electric capacity to accommodate these new appliances. EJA provides rebates for the Grid Resilience and Innovation Program, or GRIP, which I know Maryland utilities are applying for and should continue to apply for to modernize their grids. There are also cross-cutting grants available that are especially relevant to municipal customers, such as the IRA's climate pollution reduction grants. These grants can fund a range of measures, including energy efficiency programs, community solar installations, and electric buses to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, especially in underserved communities. Utilities' awareness of these federal funds should be informing their planning processes. They should ensure that any rebates or make-ready upgrades they offer are complementary with available federal funds. After all, federal grants are intended to be combined with utility funds in order to maximize their effectiveness. Utilities should also be targeting distribution grid upgrades to accommodate customers that are electrifying their buildings or transportation fleets. As one example, utilities could build high-power distribution line extensions to serve Maryland's high-speed highway charging network. Utilities should also ensure the scale of their grid upgrades, including line extensions, substations, transformers, and other related equipment, are future-proofed, which means built with an eye toward future needs of the grid in a number of years into the future. They should be able to be cost-effectively expanded to service the anticipated EV fleets, for example, in 10 to 15 years, rather than just built to accommodate the number of EV fleets on Maryland's roads today. However, we do agree with OPC's caution that utilities should not receive a blank check to build any distribution system upgrades that could potentially be relevant in the future for federal funds. Instead, the Commission should ensure utilities develop reasonable standards to target their investment in areas of the grid that will need to be bolstered to support electrification. Going forward, we also urge the Commission to broaden the reporting requirements in PC56. Maryland's utilities should be using this docket to report on which sources of federal funds they're applying for, which they're choosing not to apply for, and which federal funding opportunities they're supporting customers in applying for. Utilities should also share the steps they're taking to inform their customers about sources of federal funds that customers themselves can directly apply for. We also strongly agree with Earthjustice's request that PC56 be opened up to more public comments and more public participation. Our recommendations are aligned with the General Assembly's requirements under the recently enacted HB 1393 that utilities diligently pursue both EJA and IRA funds and report more regularly on their efforts to secure this funding. Thank you for providing this opportunity to share our recommendations on utilities' application, usage, and reporting on federal funds under these laws. We look forward to continuing to participate in this docket in the future.
Okay, so the discussion we had with the utilities, quite honestly, was focused on grants that they would qualify for and have them apply for it, as opposed to the ones that their customers can do. And I mean, I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you think we should be asking them to do as a way of encouraging their customers to apply for the grants, so to speak, that, you know, and I know those are mainly tax credits and other price incentives for purchasing equipment, but what role should they be playing in that over and above what they're doing right now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So utilities are in a unique position where they regularly interface with their customers. They could supply mailings or information online or by email about federal grants that customers could apply for. A number of the utilities, at least I know Pepco has a home audit, energy audit program, and information about federal incentives, tax credits, and rebates could kind of be folded into that energy audit program. So there are a number of ways in which utilities could kind of send this information towards residential customers, and then larger customers, if utilities are having any kind of stakeholder meetings with, say, like municipal transit agencies or school districts that have school bus fleets, then this could be more a focus of meetings. And utilities could conduct outreach to those larger customers that are really good candidates for applying for federal funds, but may just not have as much centralized knowledge it's like utilities could be a source of more centralized knowledge for those larger customer sources.
And, I know there's, pots of money that are available to other branches of state government. Have you been interacting with other state agencies as far as encouraging them to, seek the money that's out there that's available to them?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, Sierra Club is definitely engaged in that advocacy also. I know we've had meetings with DHCD about rebates and grants, especially for lower income Marylanders, and MEA is, I believe, the agency that will be administering a number of grants. So yes, it's a good question. It's something we aim to continue doing.
Okay. Commissioner Sussman.
So the utilities, when they apply for grants, are limited in what they can apply for. It has to be what DOE has decided is important. And clearly one of the things the DOE has decided is important is to build out the grid. And so, sort of monies available are sort of focused on adding infrastructure, but when you add infrastructure, you add cost to ratepayers. And so, and I can't really, sort of fault them because they're limited in what they can apply for. But you don't always have to apply for everything that's kind of there. And so I guess from the perspective of Sierra Club, where you're interested in starting to address the climate issues and to eliminate GHG emitting resources. The things that I'm concerned about are sort of overbuilding in a way that will accommodate additional electricity usage, but are going to result in explosions in rates for ratepayers. And so I guess the question is, from the Sierra Club's perspective, is there a way to think about how and what utilities sort of are applying for in terms of grants that are available and other ways in which we can address the problem without, a utility gets half the money, but it's still going to have to put up its half, and that's going to result in increases in ratepayer costs. So, yeah, that's a good point. And Sierra Club has many Maryland ratepayer members as well, including myself. I worry less about you and me. No offense, but I worry about the people who are not here. Yeah, I completely. And who struggle every day and every week to pay their bill. Mm-hmm. And I'm listening to all of this money being spent, and the technology is really cool, and I'm a little geeky when it comes to the technology, but I also have to kind of stop myself and step back and say, okay, so all of that's great, and it's really great to move ahead, but we also have to think about how we're spending money, and is there a way to get to where we need to get to without making these kinds of investments? And so so while while the utilities are sort of doing their thing, and that's great, they can only apply for what's there, and DOE makes decisions about what's going to be available and what's not. From Sierra Club's perspective, are there other things that you're thinking about in terms of sort of promoting and encouraging?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, and we really are concerned about that as well. I would just point out that a number of these grid upgrades will likely need to occur regardless of whether utilities are making them now proactively, because utilities won't be, the tide is trending toward electrification, and as Maryland implements its Advanced Clean Cars 2 rule and its Advanced Clean Trucks rule, vehicle fleets will be electrifying regardless. So what we're hoping for is for utilities to take advantage of the federal funds now that might cover 50 to 60-something% of the cost, rather than moving all those costs further down the road, and utilities might have to cover the entire cost. So we're not asking that utilities be investing in things they wouldn't otherwise need to invest in. We're just more hoping utilities could front load those investments, do them now, think more proactively about where exactly they would, where on their where in their service territory there would be new fleets, where new buildings would be going up that are all electric, like where they need to invest in distribution system upgrades, and not so much investing in a whole slew of things that are not necessary or not helpful to Maryland ratepayers or not ultimately
Well,
relevant.
that's the rub, is that, what's necessary. And so, I mean, anybody can justify any spend. I guess what I'm sort of cautioning is, as we move forward and as we look to make grid enhancements, let's not forget that there are other things that we can do that are less costly, and could perhaps yield the same results. So, I always talk about, let's try not to be siloed, but let's try not to be siloed even in this federal funding. Let's not just grab it because it's there, because there is a cost to it. And let's try to think about other ways to get to the same result.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, other state agencies may also be able to, there could be ways to use Maryland tax revenue to invest in some of these outcomes also, if that's what you're getting at.
Well, I'm getting at, there may be ways in which we can get to where we need to get to without building out the transmission grid, maybe, we need to go more local. And I'm not going to sort of list all the things we need to do. All I'm suggesting is as we look towards the money, which is great, let's not forget that there are other ways that we can also tackle this, and let's not leave those behind.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mielt, for being here today, and also I just wanted to recognize the time you spent on behalf of Sierra Club with OPSI the other day, and talking about what Sierra Club is doing, as far as trying to address, coming up with solutions, alternative solutions to some of the transmission problems we're facing as a state, and I think you're doing that, and then also Sierra Club is actively engaged right now with PJM, working with some of the organizations like People's Council and other public interest groups to try to promote at PJM an issue charge to come up with alternative solutions to just the reliability must run. So I think it's great that organization like yours, a PIO, is disengaged, and I think the kind of solutions that you're bringing to the table, I think are innovative. They're big, and I guess the question I'm trying to get to is, how can we use your organizations to help in engage with our utilities, not just our distribution utilities, but try to help them come together with other parts of their companies that may be in transmission, and then maybe former parts of their company that are in generation, and try to come up with these holistic solutions. Again, like what Sierra Club is doing, which really the utilities, writ large should be doing. And so I guess I'm just trying to figure out, is there something we can do as a commission to get and to really value and use the PIOs to be a part of the process of working to get some of these federal grants for these big solutions? Is that too? I think I was trying to throw you again what you're already doing, but I think we could really value your engagement in this area of trying to get federal funds.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the intro to that question. Yeah, I would say, the RMR in reference to Brandon Shores is, I would say, a good illustration of just the risks of not proactively planning far enough in advance, and then facing actually steeper costs down the road because...
Super cost,
yeah.
Good word.
Did I say... Oh, I thought I said steeper cost.
No, I said super cost. I did.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that too. Yeah, so I think that's... And then that's also an illustration where tax credits available under the IRA might come in handy to resolve an existing issue, as opposed to just being somewhere that utilities are spending money but not helping their customers. I think the more there are these opportunities for public engagement and public comment and dockets like this, the more opportunity public interest groups have to apply lessons learned from other states. Since these are new sources of funding and new types of rebates and new federal programs, it's something that I know at least Sierra Club has really spent a lot of time digesting and producing guidance on and kind of providing recommendations on across multiple states. So we do have some of that institutional knowledge that we welcome the opportunity to apply to Maryland, something that worked well in, say, Illinois or just a different state. So I think that, yeah, having more opportunities for engagement early on is a very helpful way for us to provide input and recommendations, especially on issues like coal plant retirements, transmission issues, things that are serious issues in Maryland that are also cross-cutting and apply in relatively similar ways in different states. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it is. And again,
Okay.
it was kind of a long wind. I was trying to both thank Sierra Club for its engagement with Maryland and with OPSI, and again, try to figure out how we can also, use the work and the expertise that you're developing in this area to also help us work with our utilities to get these federal grants so that we can afford some of these big and alternative approaches than just kind of continuing to build the grid of the past, or just having these sort of short-term patchwork solutions that we're kind of looking at right now that don't aren't more forward-looking as to how will that also help us with offshore wind and with some of our other clean energy and climate goals.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're now facing a period of newer challenges and opportunities for innovation, and it's something we're all sort of figuring out together. But it's something the federal government recognized in passing those pieces of legislation and creating those new programs. So hopefully we can continue to help Maryland think of good ways to take advantage of those grants.
Yeah, if there are ways that we can again help you engage with our utilities, I think we'll be all ears. And so thank you, thank Casey Roberts, and of course Susan Miller. We really appreciate the work you're doing here.
Yeah, thanks, and I'll keep that in mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much. So let me now turn to Earth Justice.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Commissioners. I am here today on behalf of Earth Justice, the Maryland League of Conservation Voters, the Center for Progressive Reform, and the National Consumer Law Center. As you are aware, on May 5th, 2022, OPC filed a petition asking for a proceeding to be open. The Commission rejected that petition without asking for any comments from any other stakeholders. I, on behalf of 14 nonprofit organizations, asked the Commission to reopen the proceeding and allow other people to comment. That was also rejected. This is just kind of a slightly long-winded way to say May 1st was our first opportunity to comment on the federal funding in this proceeding, and we greatly appreciate that opportunity. As you're also aware, Order Number 90272 required the utilities to file monthly reports which were supposed to discuss the funding which the utility applied for, the purposes for which the funding was intended to be used, and its connection to state policy goals, as well as the status of the funding application and conditions that must be met to obtain the funding. Sadly, the informational reports filed by the vast majority of the information reports filed by the utilities failed to even discuss these basic issues and provide this basic information, making it impossible for stakeholders like my clients to even be able to ascertain what the utilities were doing and whether they were doing what they should. For example, and I want to stress, I'm using a filing by PE as an example, but I'm not meaning to single out PE. The vast majority, you could pick any utility and find that they had the same type of problems. In PE's March 29th filing, the company lists 3 potential funding opportunities. However, PE fails to discuss how these individual projects will align with the state policy goals, and the general nature of the description makes it impossible for stakeholders to evaluate the proposals. Moreover, as discussed by PE in this letter, the first portfolio they discuss states that a portion of this project will be in the Maryland service territory. And for the third project they discuss, PE states that some of the locations may be in PE service territories. So it is impossible to even tell whether these projects are actually going to benefit Maryland residents in the PE service territory because it's simply too vague as to what's going to happen. And despite the minimal requirements, none of the utilities actually met those requirements and provided the information necessary for stakeholders in the commission to evaluate the federal funding efforts. Now for a minute I was going to discuss what for now and forever will be known as the overlord issue. In the same letter, PE notes that First Energy's first GRIP funding application, which was rejected, sought a total of $100 million, and that approximately only $7 million of that would be dedicated to PE service territory. Similarly, I could find nothing in the record that says that Delmarva has an application for a single federal funding. It raises concerns that the parent company, which has utilities in a number of jurisdictions, may be causing the Maryland utilities to actually compete internally with other Exelon or First Energy utilities, and how they're making the determination as to what their different utilities get the federal funding, and whether that is a balanced determination and is fair to all the utilities, and in particular, quite frankly, the Maryland utilities. As the Commission is aware, the General Assembly changed the law to require you to issue regs or orders rather than giving you the option to do so. I believe that is because the General Assembly also was not enamored with the choice that was made to just file monthly reports. So I think we have to figure out a way forward to bring people together who have expertise in different areas, like low income expertise and things like that, to have discussions. And I recognize there are often shortened time frames, and some of these discussions should take place in advance of the letters coming out, just more generic discussions about what could be done, and then once the letter comes out, you can see which of those things fit. The chairman mentioned the promotion and how the utilities, the promotion of different fundings, and how the utilities could work with that. I recognize that in your Empower order, you actually set forth the development of the regulations for Empower and the promotion. And I think that's very important because there's two things. One, particularly low income customers, but most customers don't have the wherewithal to find all the monies that are available to them. So what needs to be developed is not only promotion, but a one-stop shop, where if I'm a customer, I come in and someone can tell me any funding that's available to help me out, regardless of whether it's this federal funding, whether it's state funding, anything. I should just be able to make one stop and be told all that. And the promotion is also very important because the individual won't even come to ask that until they see something, more than likely, or they're told that something's available. So I think the utilities, as discussed by Sierra Club, the utilities play a very strong role because they have connections to every single utility customer. They send them materials all the time. They can promote these things through a number of different avenues and media to let people know, if you're getting a new heat pump, there's a great benefit of a heat pump rebate. You should go talk to these people about how to get that heat pump rebate and what you have to do. So, and also with regard to the downstream funding and partners that the utilities recommended, I think that's why the Commission needs to have a role of a facilitator and help bring people together. The utilities mentioned that they've been talking to different people, and they were a little hesitant to say who they've been talking to, and I recognize there's a problem with the competitive nature of the funding. But there needs to be a way to bring people in the room who have other expertise other than the utilities expertise, who've done this in different areas, and who can say, my jurisdiction really feels like it needs this. What would we need from the utility to be able to achieve that? And and the utility may tell them, well, to resolve your problem, that's not the best solution. This is the best solution. So you need to get people in the room who have different ideas and different solutions, so they can pick out the best solutions for different circumstances, and kind of learn from each other and develop the best applications to the federal government.
Okay, so dealing with the first item, the idea of some stakeholder engagement by them. I guess I'm trying to figure out what the process would be. I mean, you heard earlier when they were up here about, they have their internal teams and some of them are Exelon people and some are located in the utility. But given the, I guess there's two problems. One, the process that one has to go through to sort of get the money. I mean, the concept paper, and then, depending on what reaction you get to that, the grant application and things like that. And then the other question is sort of the timing, given the fact that there's a little quick turnaround on this. I mean, can you give me some suggestions of a process that we could request that they undertake to involve more outside interest in at least suggesting ideas to them for stuff to go after?
Well, I think there are two things. One, you mentioned their internal process. Their internal process could include a few outside individuals, include OPC, include staff. It doesn't have to be solely 100% internal, who could be included from the get-go of when they know they're going to put in a concept paper and things like that. And I recognize that has to be a very small group of people. You can't have like a work group of 40 people to do that. There are people, a small number of people who could participate in their internal process to help with the actual formation of a concept or the actual formation of the application. And the other one would be, I don't want to call it a work group because they can, I don't want to disparage work groups. I've been on a lot of work groups and I think they can come up with some great ideas, but they can also be a little large and unwieldy. The commission, through either order or regulation, could create what I would call something like an advisory board or something like that, or a task force, would just be a much smaller group of people, OPC, staff, maybe one low-income representative, MEA, and a small group of maybe 10 people who would work with the utilities for the idea aspect of it. That, just trying to, we know that DOE is going to have this next GRIP coming up, and I hate to use GRIP because I think I agree with Commissioner Suchman that transmission isn't the only solution, but, DOE is going to have these renewable funding opportunities come up. Let's just brainstorm what type of things, knowing what we already know about what DOE is looking for, brainstorm what those could look like. And then once the actual request comes out, some or a lot of those may drop away because they don't fit DOE's request, but at least you have built a list of possibilities that you don't have to try to come up with things at the last minute.
And I guess the other issue is, I mean, conceptually it sounds fine to say, look, let's include outside stakeholders, but, where do you sort of draw the line about, who's relevant to the process and who's just not, who just sort of wants to be there and doesn't really add anything? And how do you make, I mean, do we let them make that determination? Do we make that determination, or how does it work?
Well, that's why I wanted to avoid the work group
Sure.
designation, because that includes everybody who wants to do it. And I think the commission could actually say, we're going to create a internal process with the utilities, and we're going to determine broadly, not by specific person name, who gets to participate. And how you determine who gets to participate is, one, people with recognized expertise like OPC, it could be National Consumer Law Center, it could be DHCD, and the commission simply designate, and people could petition the commission, to say, we feel we have the expertise that could contribute to this, but it ultimately would be the commission's decision as to who they think could actually contribute to that limited process, and people who couldn't be in that limited process could be considered for the advisory board, which comes up with the ideas. Because I think a lot of people have ideas, but they don't have the technical expertise to follow through with the actual process part of it.
Okay. Commissioner Sussman.
Okay, so so I'm thinking out loud a little bit, maybe in small groups. So, I mean, there are challenges to doing something like this, because putting together a concept paper is a very confidential process, and utilities do not want to share what they're doing with others. And you've got utilities back there, and they will tell you that. And the fact of the matter is when a company is plugged in, they know something is coming out before it comes out. So on some level, when the funding opportunity announcement comes out, those who are plugged in already have their concept papers done. So there is a whole sort of process going on. I'm wondering if there is a way to, we've got the distribution system planning process going on to look at sort of ways of thinking about how to build out the grid in a way that involves stakeholder processes, so that it's not just the utility. And I wonder if there is a way for engagement without necessarily getting into the specifics of actually responding to the FOA, because that is a very having and not disparaging OPC in any way, but if OPC is involved in everybody's planning processes, then they get a window into what's happening at BGE and PE, and I can imagine the utilities would be really uncomfortable with a party that has access to the thinking of all these companies. But maybe there is a way in which to have an advisory group that actually looks at the issues on a more generic basis, but that also, there's no reason why this group can't go to DOE and have a conversation about what their thinking is, because those who are plugged in and who visit DOE have a pretty good sense of what's coming down the pipe, and so you might want to think a little bit about it. In terms of the information available to customers, I think that's just a great idea, and we may just want to even go beyond that to let customers know what kinds of programs are available within the utility in terms of time of use rates, or how do you, if a customer is interested in building out solar, what kinds of programs does the utility offer, and what kinds of state and federal tax credits are available, so that it's not just, the problem with just identifying tax credits is it suggests to the customer, that's it. This is what's available to you and nothing else. But if you have a sort of comprehensive giveaway leaflet that says, you want to deploy solar on your roof, this is what you can do. You can even put community solar in there, so that the customer has all of the information available. Federal tax credits, if there's state tax credits, whatever's available, so that they can make the best decision based on what's available.
I absolutely agree with it. I think it should be more kind of like an energy promotion, where any aspect of energy you can find information here. And I agree with you with regard to tax credits, because particularly for low-income customers, tax credits tend not to be helpful for them because of their income level, they don't pay much taxes.
Right.
So so to just tell people about the tax credits available won't be helpful.
Right, but if you can tell them about community solar.
You can tell them about community
Right.
solar, if you can tell them about any solar programs that actually may help them put solar on their own homes if they happen to own the homes. So I agree, it should cover every aspect of energy and how that energy can save the money. It should cover the energy efficiency
So
programs.
are you volunteering? Because we're a little short on staff. I'm just,
Well, I would have to check with my boss.
Yeah. There we go. No, and we can figure out, but getting that information, we know it, and even we struggle. And then you can just imagine somebody who, is working 2 or 3 jobs. How are they going to be able to work their way through all this? But if we can give them something that kind of lays out all of the different options that they can build on a project so that it can become available to them in a way that it couldn't before.
Yeah, and just for another example is, for example, if you're concerned about emergency power, to let them know that batteries may be suitable for them for emergency power, and things like that, to just have anything that might be available in the energy sphere that might help them take care of their energy needs. I think it would be very beneficial for them to be able to go to one place to at least get the initial information.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. I'm glad you're finally here. As you may recall, I did write separately from the previous commission decision, and I appreciate what the chairman is doing today. This was more of what I had imagined we should have been doing about a year or so ago, so I'm glad you're here. I don't really have any question. I think the chairman covered really what I was most interested in hearing from both the witnesses for the PIO organizations. How can we better engage you in this process of seeking federal funds? And I think it's important you be part of this process, because I think that's how we best deploy these funds in the public interest. So again, thank you both for being here, and I'll be interested to know how on an ongoing basis we can make sure that you're a vital part of this whole process of seeking these funds. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Any other colleagues from the public interest community here today that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. So with that, why don't we turn to the governmental agencies, and we'll start with MEA.
Hello, good afternoon, Commissioner. Commissioner Hoover and Commissioners, I'm Joyce Lombardi. I'm with the Maryland Energy Administration. As you know, we are the State Energy Office, and as you also know, we have a statutory role under PUA 7803 to be part of these proceedings, and we're very happy to be here. The filings have been great, and we're very glad not only to have been a kind of a part of this behind the scenes, but also now today. So, as you know, we filed comments on May 1st, and so today I won't reiterate everything that's in there, but I'll highlight some of the things. I've got a clarification, then I have a couple of updates. And so one of those for May 1st, one of the things that we said germane to these proceedings, and as you know, we at MEA, we give out state funding, quite a bit of state funding under SEAF, but we also are a pass-through increasingly for the federal programs. And so those are some of the comments that we focused on in this proceeding, and some of the federal programs that are coming that we have. Who's looking at me? I want to make sure. You okay? Good. So the federal programs is under the IIJA, which is the 40101D program, and that one's coming. It's small potatoes compared to some of the other things that we're talking about today, but that's a $13 million grant that comes from the IIJA. It's coming through us, and that is for a grid resilience, and there's the title. It's a grid resilience and enhancement, and so that's really for natural disasters, wildfires, things like that. And so as we put in our comments, and I just want to highlight that today, that money is going to be for businesses, including utilities, communities, for anything related to grid hardening, the bulk power supply, and distribution systems. So, for example, pole utility management, vegetation management, reconductoring is part of it that we discussed today. There's a big laundry list that we have, and the laundry list comes from federal guidance, right? So this is not us, it's all to be determined. Monitoring control technologies, also DER technologies, and the one clarification that we did write, that some of the DER technologies for capacity that we put in our filed comments, it includes microgrids. There's a little bit of clarification that from DOE that it's not necessarily for generation, right? So microgrids to the extent that they help with capacity. So I just want to put that on the record. As you know, MEA, our fiscal year ends June 30th, and so we are rushing to finish up the grant programs for about 20 different grant programs, 220 grants, and our priority right after that is to get the notice of intent for this 40101D money out on the street this summer very soon. So that was kind of one update. And one of the utilities, the joint utilities had mentioned in their filing, so I wanted to mention it here. And of course, we mentioned in our May 1st comments about HB 1393, so we didn't file June 1st comments, but of course, to the extent that there's going to be a rulemaking, we're glad to be part of that proceeding and to keep having these discussions about how to improve this process. We at MEA, we have worked, and our role is to, like yours, assist and support utilities, electric companies in applying for and seeking federal grant fundings that promote state goals. And so to that end, we've helped with letters of support when the projects, for example, you guys talked about the Fairmont Heights microgrid here today. That was something that was an MEA community partner. They in turn partnered with PEPCO. We in turn did a letter of support. And so that supported the state goals. We have a state program on resilience, we MEA, and so we kind of supported kind of a loop around for PEPCO to go and get some GRIP money. So it's circular, but it's kind of a way that we're promoting the goals. As we've talked about here, no, we don't believe that the utilities should be going for everything, but the things that promote the state goals, that work into the right role for utilities. As you know, we have a lot of dockets on what is the right role for utilities in the EV space. That's morphing, it's changing, and so this docket helps us do that. What's out there, and quite honestly, one of the filings super helpful for us is what's out there, what are they going for, and what are they not going for. Even the discussion that we had today from Mr. Cook talking about the Title 17 money is that some of it's not cost effective, right? So it's not least cost debt, and here's why. So that's a really interesting conversation. We'd like to kind of continue doing those in a forum that's as public as it can be. So it's not just us talking with one utility, but this information is for everybody, as it's kind of an all hands on deck to know what's out there, what are they going for, what are they not going for, what should they be going for, and then how in the proceedings before you do we come around and look at the prudency of these costs. I think the only other, and that's it. So with this docket, we'd like to continue publishing things that may become available. As you mentioned, Commissioner Suchman, they might already know, but maybe all the utilities don't. So to the extent that we can say, hey, here's some things that are out there, the other parties, the other interveners can continue to advertise and say, here's these grants. It gives us a place to kind of talk about what's out there, and then in other proceedings, continue to work together to see if, did you apply for it, why not? So, we certainly welcome this proceeding and this opportunity.
So, there's been a lot of talk about the trying to handle the parts of the federal funding process that's aimed at customers of utilities, not just the utilities themselves. And since you guys give out a lot of grants and incentives to individual customers, I mean, what's the role that you're playing in trying to coordinate, the state-based grants with the federal grants, and what information are you providing to customers writ large across the state?
Exactly. And one thing that we talked about we mentioned in our May 1st is the Homes and HERA grant under the IRA. That's $168 million. It's coming from DOE. We've done the initial application. We've applied for the early administrative. We're waiting on DOE to grant that. And when that money comes in, it allows us to do the hiring, the program, and the planning to do exactly those kinds of things. I mean, the coordination with DHCD, with us, with the utilities, other people have talked about a one-stop shop, and although we're not committing to do that, but layering, we've certainly had conversations with our utility and community partners. And so that coordination is only going to continue to be important. And the homes and the homes in the HERA rebate is so far as energy efficiency, air source heat pumps, things like that, appliances. So it's not the entire universe that we're talking about today, but that coordination is absolutely something that we envision to be part of our planning process, our hiring process, and we'll go forward with that. The larger question, I think that, what you were just talking about with Sierra Club is kind of the larger one-stop shop. We do give a lot of state grants. We do have a website to say, hey, here's what's happening. To the extent that there's an agency that's going to coordinate all of the, or publicize all of the grants that are available. I'm not volunteering us, but certainly we're well aware of that, and we're well aware of the need, and we've had a lot of conversations with our partners, with utilities, and that's only going to become, when that money hits the street, that's only going to become a kind of a greater need of which we are well aware.
And so this discussion we had earlier about some sort of process where people outside of the utility could be involved in suggesting or planning with the utility as to what grants they go after, and there were different entities mentioned as possible invitees to such a meeting. I mean, I would envision that your agency might be one of those that might be in there, and there was a concern raised that, well, if an OPC is invited to the party, maybe there's a little problem with them just because of their involvement in rate proceedings. But since you don't represent a specific customer group in a rate proceeding, you have a more broader policy thing. Maybe you're a safer choice in the stakeholder process?
Perhaps. When we do a letter of support, and we will, we also say this doesn't preclude us in a later proceeding. Like we're not you, so it's not a prudency review, but because it's a good idea and we get a general concept in the beginning and it fits into state policy, that doesn't mean later in a regulatory proceeding, we wouldn't want to preclude the Maryland Energy Administration from weighing in from a policy perspective. We know the other parties get more granular in terms of management and so forth and the costs, but we also are concerned about reliable, affordable energy and don't want to close off that either. But I think your larger question, I also think that under the law, we have a role anyway. Like, we are there to assist and support, so
Okay.
just say that.
Richard.
No questions. Thank you for being here.
Thank
We
you.
look very much to MEA as kind of our rudder as far as following state policy, and also look to you for guidance on issues of affordability, cost effectiveness, and those types of things too. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Fleischman.
Yes, so, don't go anywhere. Yes, so actually I wanted to talk to you about the Pepco's microgrid. So can you give me a sense of sort of the role you've played in this, how you sort of got involved, any MEA grants that went into the process. So this morning we heard from the utilities side of because it's going to be part of the battery storage pilot, but I'm really curious about how the other parts of it came together.
And so I'll answer that, Commissioner Suchman. To the best, the programs team, I got this information from them, so if they're watching, we'll correct the record. But
Well, and to the extent that, and actually this is an open invitation, to the extent you have more information on that, I'd love to see it.
I have a little of my understanding is that we worked with HIP, which I forget, Housing Initiative Partnership in Fairmount Heights. They were our partner. We have the Resilient Maryland Grant, which is a DER microgrid, kind of an innovation grant. Our community partner was HIP. HIP chose, I don't know how the relationship between HIP and Pepco started, but they were chosen. We worked with HIP first. We gave a Resilient Maryland grant. I want to say 280. If I'm getting that wrong, I'm sorry. It was
$280.
thousand. Still small in
Yeah.
the amount of money that's out there and what's needed, but something.
Right.
And so if your question is beyond
Well,
that,
I'm sort of wondering if in terms of initiating the microgrid, it came from, did it come from the grid developer? Did it come from Pepco? Did it come from?
I don't think it became from Pepco. Beyond that, quite honestly, I would be guessing.
Okay, but if you
Quite
can,
honestly.
but if you
I'll
can,
find out.
yeah, that would be great.
I'll
So,
get you a cogent, true answer.
Yes, please. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
Great. Thank you all.
Let me turn to Office of People's Counsel. Just staff.
Let's just go through it. Oh, okay.
I'll be right back.
Good afternoon again, Chairman Hoover. Commissioner, should I wait for Commissioner Secretary? Okay.
Won't be long. So.
Yeah. Mr. Court Reporter, for the record, my name is Mark Shebist, Mark with a K, and last name is spelled S, Z as in zebra, B as in bus, I-S-T, with the Maryland Office of People's Counsel.
Okay, on the record, go ahead.
Great. Good afternoon again, Chair Hoover, Commissioners. Mark Shebus for the Office of People's Counsel. I first want to thank the Commission, echoing previous speakers, for opening this comment period, having this hearing. Commissioner Richard, thank you for your statement on the previous decision. I think this discussion has already been very generative. We've learned things about the utilities processes that I think are very helpful. And again, we appreciate this and look forward to the continuing conversation. I'm going to try to be as brief as I can.
You're good.
Okay, thank you.
Right, we don't have to get out of here today, right? We turn off the lights?
OPC filed pretty extensive initial comments and reply comments, and I'm not going to walk through everything we said in those comments. I want to first just recap our recommendations in the initial comments because we continue to stand by those. Nothing that has been said in comments filed by other parties have convinced us that those recommendations are misplaced. And then I'll go through a number of particulars, some things that have come up in the exchange of comments and have come up today. So we had two main comments in our initial comments. First, that the Commission should initiate a rulemaking to require electric companies, we mentioned gas companies too, although I'm not sure how much gas companies were ever really intended to be part of this proceeding, and obviously they haven't been participating. But whatever companies the Commission decides should be subject to these directions. There should be a rulemaking to require companies to diligently monitor and pursue federal and state funding opportunities that apply directly to utilities, the kinds we've been talking about today, grants, loans, and tax credits, and to promote to customers the availability of federal and state rebates, tax credits, and other incentives to support energy efficiency and electrification investments, which is, that other promotion is something that, you've been talking about with previous speakers. And that gets us into House Bill 864, the Empower Bill, which contained the directive for the Commission to do a rulemaking to do exactly that. I know that the Commission recently issued its Order 91175 in case 9705, that's the current Empower proceeding, that is generally the HB 864 implementation order and starts a process for the development of regulations specifically for that piece. And I'm looking at the order right now. Staff is directed to file the regulations by February 14th, 2025, and to develop a plan for the regulations by July 15th of this year, which was pretty soon. And then the utilities are directed to include in their August 15th, 2024 filing in the Empower docket how they will promote the federal and state tax rebate or federal and state rebates, tax credits, and incentives that are governed by the amended provision of the Public Utilities article. We continue to think that a holistic rulemaking that covers both those issues, the promotion of tax credits and rebates by the utilities to their customers on one hand, and the utilities' pursuit of direct funding opportunities for themselves, would be best covered by a single rulemaking, which isn't to say that the same staff and work group processes would do both. I think this proceeding is the appropriate place to develop whatever rulemaking the Commission adopts for the utilities' pursuit of direct opportunities. The Empower process is the proper place to figure out what that part of the regulation looks like. But because both things involve the utilities monitoring, keeping up to date on what opportunities there are, both for themselves directly and for their customers, I think it makes sense to address both of those issues through a single rulemaking. Again, with the two different pieces of the regulation developed in these different dockets. Our second recommendation in our initial comments was that pending the promulgation of new regulations, the Commission should establish new additional reporting requirements for companies while maintaining the current requirements in Order 90272. And those requirements that we recommended, first to report on funding opportunities that companies have sought under the IRA as well as the IIJA, and I think that's pretty well required by HB 1393, to describe in detail the company's efforts to monitor federal funding opportunities under the IIJA, IRA, and other federal statutes that may provide funding opportunities. Again, we've learned a lot about what the companies are doing on that front through this proceeding, but I think it's would be good for the commission to receive continuous updates on what the companies are doing. 3, identify a single senior level company employee who's responsible for the company's efforts to monitor and apply for federal funding. I believe we heard from all of the utilities today that not only do they have teams, in some case these cross-functional teams that span the utility itself and the holding company, but I think I heard each of them say that there is an individual who sort of leads the teams, which is great, and I think it'd be good for the commission to know for each utility who that individual is. 4th, to provide in future rate case filings and other filings where projects are proposed information on whether IIJ or IRA funding may be utilized for the planned projects, along with detailed information regarding the company's efforts to procure least cost debt, including from the DOE Loan Programs Office. 5th, for companies that have filed rate cases since the commission issued Order 90272, to review the company's existing capital programs to identify projects that may be eligible for federal funding opportunities. 6, to file with the commission any feedback received from a federal agency where a company's application for funding has been rejected or a concept paper has not been encouraged. I think I'm up to 7th now. Regularly disclose the expenditures and any savings the company has recorded to its PC56 regulatory asset. And finally, to report on any federal funding opportunities received by affiliate utilities. And that goes to the issue that Ms. Miller brought up. OPC shares the concern that with holding companies being involved in this process, you could end up with different utilities of the holding company, in effect, competing against each other. And she used the example of Potomac Edison seeking $100 million for one of its GRIP opportunities, or rather, First Energy, I think, submitting that application, but only 7 of that $100 million was earmarked for Potomac Edison. I want to move now into some particular points, and the first one has to do with the sort of holding company issue. I guess the overlord issue is what we've been calling it. I think I heard Mr. Frayne for BGE say that, or a couple of BGE or Exelon speakers comment on the fact that the one issue with the DOE LPO loans is that they may not be the least cost debt when taking into account all the sort of requirements associated with applying for that money and whatever reporting requirements are associated. And I heard $100 million amount, as I think it was suggested that that amount is a sort of threshold below which loans may not be, DOE loans may not be the most cost-effective loans. One thing OPC's understanding is that you don't need a single project that, and I'm just, for purposes of today, I'm going to assume that that's right, even though I'm not sure it is, that 100 million or any other amount is sort of that kind of threshold. But assuming that it is, one potential benefit for both the Exelon utilities and for Potomac Edison as a First Energy company is that with the holding company is in a position to have a line of sight across all its different utilities and apply with some of its utilities, stitching together multiple different projects, which collectively would exceed 100 million or perhaps a larger sum of money. I believe that that's something that's permitted under the DOE LPO rules. So assuming that you have to have a certain magnitude of project to make the DOE loans pencil out, I think it's possible to put together multiple different projects. It may be difficult for a single distribution utility to do that, but probably much easier for all 3 Exelon utilities in Maryland or perhaps others in other states to work together to put together a large portfolio which could easily exceed the $100 million threshold and prove to be the lowest cost debt. So I think that's something that can be further explored and could potentially be a real benefit of the sort of holding company structure we have for both the Exelon utilities and for Potomac Edison. There was discussion during the Exelon utilities presentation about GRIP funding and the potential need for commission pre-approval in some form before the utility can sort of secure particular grants. I think it would be useful to see exactly what the DOE said. OPC had not heard that, I think, before today, and you know, it could be that there's space in there, depending on exactly what the DOE is asking for, to provide something that meets their needs without a commitment up front to say, you know, we think this is a prudent expenditure before that's really possible to say. So that I think we need more clarification and more information in order to figure out how to negotiate that process. And the other question that raised for OPC was, if that's what the DOE has been asking for these GRIP projects, does that mean that the pending projects you've heard about from the utilities are dead in the water because none of them has that? And that's I think a question more for the utilities. Another point of discussion that came up today was sort of innovation versus business as usual projects. I think both the Exelon Utilities and Potomac Edison stressed that the DOE, through at least GRIP and perhaps some of these other programs, wants to fund innovative projects. It doesn't want to just replace state dollars with federal dollars. I don't know if SMECO had exactly a contradictory statement, but I believe what SMECO said is that for their project that's been approved, there's sort of three components: reliability, resiliency, and support of distributed energy resources. Now, is that innovative? I think SMECO said in its initial comments that what it has received funding for, or is in the last stage of negotiating funding for, was part of its existing distribution plan, which means either that SMECO's existing distribution plan is already sufficiently innovative, or that there is space for some of the more so-called business as usual projects to receive federal funding in some cases. So I don't know quite where that line gets drawn, but it could also be that certain business as usual projects could be done in a different way, and be innovative enough to get funding. One issue that came up in the reply comments, OPC listed a number of federal opportunities. We had a box for loans, a box for grants, and a box for tax credits that we believe distribution utilities, broadly speaking, could be eligible for. The Exelon Utilities, in their reply comments, basically reprinted the tables and provided some additional commentary. And some of the statements they made are that you know, they're just not eligible to directly apply. But there are a couple that raise questions, and I wanted to particularly flag the two tax credits that we flagged. One of which is the Clean Energy Investment Credit, which is available for generation facilities, which obviously Maryland utilities don't own, but also qualifying standalone energy storage. And the Exelon Utilities sort of response was they don't currently own generation assets in Maryland, but storage they do or will. And we're not familiar enough with the particular tax rules to know what the criteria are for qualification, but we think that's something that should be explored. Similarly, with the alternative fuel vehicle refueling property credit, it's a tax credit for EV charging stations. The Exelon Utilities said that they found their projects are not eligible for this program under the original use for tangible funding property rules governing the funding opportunity. OPC doesn't have the tax expertise to have dug into that enough to have a response to that at this stage, but we think it merits, again, further investigation. The utilities discussed both in their written comments and today that these funding opportunities, many of them are highly competitive, and we agree. And that's one of the reasons on our initial comments we sort of emphasized the processes that utilities use to monitor and sort of diligently evaluate and apply for funding opportunities more than the actual outcome of their applications to determine whether utilities are sort of diligently pursuing these things. And I just wanted to, this morning, I subscribe to some of these DOE sites themselves. And just this morning, I got a FOA, Funding Opportunity Announcement, from the Geothermal Technologies Office. Funding notice, U.S. DOE announces $7 million to help geothermal energy support a decarbonized electricity grid. Now, I haven't looked at it. I don't know exactly what that's about. I don't know whether any of that money could be useful in sort of implementing the new geothermal legislation that was passed. I believe the commission is now figuring out how to implement. But in terms of process, I can imagine as part of future utility reporting in this docket that utilities would flag announcements like this that are in the ballpark potentially for promoting and achieving Maryland's policy goals, and saying, we received notice of this announcement because we monitor, X website, and we have evaluated the opportunity, and although, Maryland has this new geothermal legislation, we don't think we qualify for this, or we do, and we intend to seek it. And that in a monthly report could lead to more discussions that if there is a need for sort of commission blessing in some form, at least of seeking the money, could put the utilities in a position to do that. Yeah, I'm just looking at my notes to make sure I'm not missing anything. I think those are the main points I wanted to make. I'm happy to answer questions about any of those particulars, any of our high-level recommendations, and any other questions the commissioners may have. And again, thank you for initiating this conversation.
So on this idea of having some sort of stakeholder engagement by you and other entities with the utilities and either developing ideas for projects or reviewing opportunities, I asked the representative from Earth Justice sort of how will we do this process, and so what are your thoughts on how such a process might be done?
Well, one thing that I think OPC asked for in our initial petition that the previous order rejected was for OPC to bring ideas, potential funding opportunities to the attention of the commission, which would then obviously they'd also come to the individual utilities that way. We could also bring issues to the utilities. I think OPC is interested in continuing dialogue with the utilities. We understand that there are sensitivities around what information can be shared. It's also true that sometimes before the utilities file particular proposals, they will come to OPC, to staff, perhaps to other stakeholders up front to sort of preview what they're going to file, sometimes to get our feedback in order to possibly make tweaks to the applications. So, that sort of, informal, ad hoc engagement, I think, is one element. Listening to Ms. Miller's idea of kind of an advisory group, I think that is workable in some form. I think, as was discussed, it might take a little more conversation to figure out exactly what that looks like. But I think it could be a forum for potential stakeholders to bring ideas to the attention of the utilities, and to talk through issues without the utilities having to disclose, confidential business information. I think I agree with Ms. Miller that a work group structure is probably not the best way to deal with that, but something more intimate, with OPC staff, MEA, that doesn't require perhaps the sharing of details, but but is a forum for higher level exchange of ideas could be useful.
Okay. Commissioner Fleischman.
Well, yeah. So the funding announcement that you just that's not an IRA. That's just, and that's what I was sort of talking about earlier. That DOA has an ungodly amount of money, and there are folks that are very plugged in and who sort of know when FOAs are coming out. I mean, there certainly are opportunities that where a stakeholder group can sort of be engaged with DOE, but it also occurs to me that a stakeholder group that kind of looks at the kinds of FOAs that the utility is responding to would probably feel more connected to the proposal and would feel better about whatever proposal is being pursued because you're a part of that. So it just seems to me that there's not a lot of downside in the companies engaging with stakeholders to talk about without needing to disclose the kinds of, the concept paper is very confidential and they're never going to want to share that with the stakeholder group, but at least talking through the kinds of ideas that they may want to pursue. I think definitely sounds like something that can be not just workable, but also allow for parties to gain knowledge about what the proposals are, and to the extent that OPC, for example, has concerns about a particular approach, you'll be able to flag that in advance, so that at least they'll know, this might be a particular project that OPC would have a lot of challenges with. I guess I just have a question about, I can understand regulations that require particular reporting because you're told to do something, and if you don't do it, there are consequences to not doing it. I guess I'm a little concerned about a regulation that requires an entity to diligently pursue something because then it's hard to measure what that means, and it's hard to know whether they've done it, and then you also don't want them to pursue something that doesn't make economic sense, or is maybe something that OPC would have a problem with, so that they can sort of meet the conditions here, but you would prefer that they not do it. So but I'm wondering if you actually need that if you've got the reporting requirements. So the reporting requirements would contain the information that you need, and you can sort of judge from that whether they've done the things that they need to do. I'm not sure that language that requires that they diligently report is enforceable language. I'm not sure how we can do it. On the other hand, requiring that they promote to the ratepayers is something that you can draft, we can approve, and is a way you can measure their performance based on the language that's there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Commissioner Suchman. I think we've been thinking about it as a sort of both-and situation. I totally get your point that if you are asking the utilities to report on the sort of right things, then you can infer from what they're saying whether they have sort of a good process in place for exploring opportunities and seeking them. I think the way we were thinking about it is that there would be a directive, a regulation that said that utilities have an obligation to diligently pursue in the sense not of necessarily applying for opportunities, but of monitoring.
Right, but I just don't know how do you measure and how do you enforce?
Yeah, and I think that links back possibly to the reporting requirements. In determining whether a utility is diligently pursuing opportunities, the commission shall consider, and then all the different things that are reported upon. How much value would that add? I'm not sure, but we always think it's good to have sort of a a clear standard about what the
Preamble.
ultimate goal is here.
Right, you put preamble in, it's not enforceable, but people like that,
Right.
okay. But you understand my concern.
I do.
I don't want to put into regulation something that is not enforceable, in any real way, so that I worry that it could create problems for us, unnecessarily.
Yeah, I understand, and that might, take some further conversation. I wanted to respond to I had forgotten about the promotion and the sort of possible benefits of having a one-stop shop as a result of coordination between the utilities and MEA and any other state agencies involved in promoting state rebates and tax credits. We think that's a really good idea. When MEA had a comment period last fall in sort of trying to figure out the design of their Homes and Here's project, OPC suggested, possibly the design of a website that could at least get some part of the way toward that. I'm not sure if commissioners are aware of the Rewiring America website. There's a tool they have online where you can put in your name, or not your name, but your zip code, your income level, some other sort of just basic information, and the tool will spit out what IRA tax credits and rebates you qualify for and provide links to sort of more information. That's a great tool for the credits and rebates, but it's not a great tool for understanding the entire universe of rebates, tax credits, and other incentives that are available through both the federal programs and Empower and any other programs that may offer them. So, I'm not sure MEA is the right agency to do it, but I think we fully agree that Marylanders could very much benefit from some sort of one-stop shop, because as Earth Justice and others have said, it's just like people don't have the time or the expertise to figure these things out for themselves.
Well, and we really do want to reach folks that are not sophisticated or just are way too busy, but really could benefit from a way to deal with their very high bill.
Agreed.
So, okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Staff.
Good evening, Chair Hoover, Commissioners. Lloyd Spivak on behalf of the Commission staff. With me is Kevin Mosier of the Commission's Energy Analysis and Planning Division. Given the late hour and given the relatively modest recommendations we made in our reply comments, I'm just going to quickly reiterate those. We really don't have that much to add at the moment, but we are available for questions. In our reply comments, we did recommend that the utilities' monthly reports currently providing information on their efforts to obtain funding through the IIJA or under IIJA programs also be required to include information regarding their efforts to obtain available funding under the IRA, and whatever efforts there are being made to ensure that least cost debt is used. We also recommend that the Commission issue an order or establishing a rulemaking somehow formalizing the requirement that electric companies apply for federal funds and other grant monies that are available to improve the state's electric grid and otherwise implement states' policy goals with respect to electricity. The one thing I might add is somewhere in there you may want to actually consider defining what's meant by least cost debt in this context, because there are a lot of different ways you could look at that, what actually constitutes least cost debt. So that's really all we're going to say up front. as I said, if you do have questions you want to address to us, in particular about things that you've heard today, we're certainly willing to do our best to answer.
So I've asked the public interest groups and OPC and I guess and MEA this idea that if we created some sort of stakeholder process for giving ideas or reviewing ideas with the utilities regarding federal funding opportunities, I mean, what's your view as to how such a thing could be constituted?
It's something closer to more like a work group process than anything else, or it could be done at a round robin. You know, there are in various corners a lot of expertise in that. I wouldn't say staff is particularly well versed in what is out there in terms of federal grants, but there are parties who are more familiar than we are, and frankly, we are going to have to evaluate the utilities' efforts in one way or another in order to provide some form of recommendation to you. So I think that would be a helpful process. But you can do it in a number of ways. You can do it through a work group. You can do it through public comment and public conferences. All of those, or you could just do it by requiring the utilities to consult with each of these parties or stakeholders individually.
Well, not to put you guys on the spot, but I mean, who is the expert on staff regarding the federal funding opportunities? I mean, is Mr. Mosier been the guy who's got the short straw, or?
I think he's probably as close to it as anybody, or that division is. But again, as I said, I mean, it's not really expertise we've had to develop previously.
Right.
It is probably something, obviously, that we will be doing our best to do so. But I mean, I think there have been occasional ad hoc situations where we've had to know or learn about things specifically, but as a general matter, it's not a role that we have usually played.
And and before you answer though, but I mean, there's been a couple of situations during the course of the day where there's been some questions about what is, what DOE's saying and things like that. I mean, what's the process you go through to try to get an answer to that, other than ask them, I guess, so.
So far, that's kind of been asked them. Yeah, Kevin Mosher on behalf of staff. Yeah, basically just trying to follow the process, looking at the utility reports that they send out every month. But yeah, as Lloyd said, it's not, frankly, short of applying for a $1,500 student loan 30 plus years ago, that is my one extent with with federal funding.
So, and is NARUC any help on this, or are they?
I think they will. They do have information on the subject. I mean, I'm pretty sure I've seen them send out things, and it's certainly a set of opportunities that we can pursue there or look for. As I said, I mean, I think we're going to. This is one of the areas in which we're going to have to develop additional expertise, just because the legislation is demanding it of us. There are a lot of things that the General Assembly is asking for, some of which they have actually provided for specific pins because we've asked for that, as the legislation came up. But certainly, this is an area that we will, I think, need to develop more information about, and we will probably be doing so. And actually, just this forum has been helpful in kind of getting an idea of what the scope is of things that are out there and how you might delineate them and think about them.
Okay. Commissioner Richard. Commissioner Sussman.
Okay, Mr. Spivak, you heard my conversation with OPC Council about legislation or regulations that would require utilities to diligently pursue, and my concern about what that would mean. But you would want to go further, and you would want to have in regulations a directive that the utilities actually pursue FOAs when they come in?
Well, I mean, if you look at the way the statute's worded, as you were having this colloquy with Mr. Shebist, I was looking back at HB 1393, and the provision is literally worded, we encourage the utilities to take advantage of these opportunities. That's the word they use, is
Right.
encourage. So it's not, an absolute, but you're getting these reports every month. You already have given them an order that they are to do something in this area and to report to the commission back what they're doing in response to the earlier legislation that required them to pursue IIJA opportunities. I guess that's Climate Solutions
I'm just
now.
trying to figure out how we can. I mean, it's hard enough to try to enforce something that is diligently pursuing. Not sure how we can enforce a directive, because then we'd actually have to we'd have to look to see what funding announcements are there, ask them why they didn't apply for the funding announcements, convene a proceeding where they would explain why it wasn't economic or it didn't fit. I mean, I'm trying to figure out how we can enforce this.
And I think there's a degree of difficulty. I mean, you can't have an absolute requirement. For instance, you can't make them apply for funding that isn't out there.
Or something that doesn't
run out,
or it doesn't make sense. I mean, because then we're actually getting into the business of making decisions. I mean, the commission never had authority to tell a utility to build a power plant. At least I'm assuming that we never had that. So
that's not an absolute, but in general.
Well, okay. So at least when I was looking at that issue, I was representing somebody else. But I'm mostly just trying to figure out from the perspective of us how a provision like this is we can enforce something like this.
And I think your best avenue to do enforcement on that is to have the reporting requirement.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that the reporting requirements give us everything that we need without the challenges of having to enforce something that I'm not sure is enforceable. I mean, not that it's not legally enforceable, but I don't see how we can do it in a way that doesn't completely burden our resources and your resources, because I'm a little mindful of that too.
Well, diligence is one of those words, like least cost, for example, that can have a lot of different meanings to a lot of different people.
Actually, we could just take the language from the legislation, which is to encourage, which seems to have no burden on us to do much of anything other than ask them, please.
And do you have the reporting requirement to kind of push them into further doing things? I mean, if you see opportunities that are out there and you are aware of such opportunities and you think they might be a perfect fit, I mean, I think you're better off bringing them to their attention and talking to them, and this goes for us really, in advance. That is, while they still have the opportunity to take advantage of those opportunities rather than going back after the fact and saying, why didn't you? I don't think the General Assembly or the legislation taken all together really allows us to be very passive about it. I mean, it kind of pushes us to be looking at what's out there and what, and helping the utilities, making suggestions, providing whatever information or assistance we can provide. It may not be at the moment as much as we might like to be able to provide, but whatever we can do in that direction, that's part of our...
Right. I'm mostly just thinking in terms of what makes the most sense in terms of what we can effectively do. and as opposed to where we're just spinning wheels. And that's, so I think, it just seems to me that the reporting requirements where you actually know what they're doing and can sort of look to see what they are and are not doing, gives us the tools that we need and the tools that you need to be able to go to the utilities and ask, well, have you thought about these other opportunities? And to the extent we have this advisory group, they can benefit from the report as well. So, okay, that's all I have.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming today and offering your thoughts and suggestions. We're going to take all of this under advisement, I guess, and be out with some directions as to how we want to go forward on that. But in the interim, I encourage the utilities to keep pursuing the federal funding opportunities that come before you.